Chapter 39. After being baptized by the bats of Devil's Arrow Rain, the third Hezru had died. The Tana re-demons who were besieging the city finally woke up from their indulgence in destroying and tearing flesh with their clenched fists and extended claws. The demons began to use their innate spell-like abilities in battle. The seemingly dumb Hezru began to use the Hammer of Chaos, which was also their specialty. Any target that was hit by this spell-like ability would feel like they had been hit by an invisible battering ram. Only a small number of mercenaries equipped with life-saving enchantment equipment were able to survive this attack. That was not the end of it. If the Hammer of Chaos did not wipe out the enemy, the Hezru would use the blasphemous whisper. Any defenders with a god they believed in would fall into the negative effects of the collapse of their faith under the influence of the malevolent whispers. Their limbs would become weak due to the confusion of their thoughts, and the divine spells bestowed by their god would become unstable. At that moment, the big toad-like demons would roar and lunge forward to taste the thrill of smashing the enemy's head with their fists. But most of the time, before the Hezru could smash the victim's head, spears and claws that came out of nowhere would take away the lives of the unlucky ones. What angered the Hezru even more were the vulture-like Vroks. The Vroks that were dodging the crossbow bolts took advantage of the fact that the battlefield was in a stalemate. While the archers were focused on the more threatening demons, the Vroks gathered in twos and threes in the air and performed a dance of destruction. After 2 rounds of this dance, a wave of explosive energy would suddenly erupt. This energy could actually cover half the size of the battlefield. Apart from the demons, any creatures that were affected by this energy would be hurt. The defenders whose faith had collapsed because of the Hezru demons could not resist and were sent to the gods they believed in to confess their mistakes. The culprits of the tragedy, the circling Vrok, were like real vultures. They let out sharp screeches and dived down before quickly flying up again, seizing the opportunity to grab a piece of fresh flesh and feasting on it in the air. After that, these cunning fellows didn't forget to summon demons again, using the delicious flesh and blood as bait to lure more of their kind to join the battle. A large number of lives were harvested like a gust of wind cutting grass. If it weren't for the barbed demon guards, who were supervising the battle, and the fact that the weapons and equipment distributed by the devils were better than expected, the otherworldly mercenaries standing on the city walls would not have been able to withstand the repeated attacks of the demon army. But even so, they couldn't hold on for too long. The seemingly endless attacks from the devils put too much pressure on them. Amidst the chaos, Broom-brow's Dalton had no time to care about the lives of his subordinates. In fact, he had already been attacked twice by the sudden appearance of the evil demon assassin, and his life had been hanging by a thread. Fortunately, his reaction was fast enough, his strength was strong enough, and most importantly, his brain was agile enough. While this former mafia boss decisively killed, he also adjusted his position in a timely manner. He never left the side where he had the advantage in numbers. He had already seen a few of his subordinates, who were tough but not smart enough, plunged into the demon army. And then there was no more then. With a burst of his kung fu, he used a set of punches with spiked gloves to smash the head of a vulture demon that had just swooped down to peck on the flesh. Dalton noticed that if there were less than 3 of these demons gathered together, they would not be able to cast the same AoE spell that could cover the battlefield. Therefore, he always chose to deal with these demons first. After all, the AoE spell could not be avoided by non-spellcasters, no matter how agile they were. They could only take it head-on. After resisting the demon's attack for more than half an hourglass, Dalton's stamina was running low even though he was an elite barbarian warrior. This was not the time to be a hero. Broom-brows turned his head and shouted. He had already noticed that there were some spellcasters among the guards. Whether it was courage, bull's strength, or some other buff spell, it would be of great use now. But when he turned his head, a situation made Dalton's eyes tighten. The sweat all over his body caused by the battle seemed to have been splashed with a bucket of cold water. The spellcasters from the other plane were now being carried by the more elite barbed demons and slowly retreating from the edge of the battle to the two sides of the city wall. The mercenaries from the material plane, who were holding up their shields to resist the demons' attack and clamping their spears, did not notice that the number of demons standing behind them to supervise the battle had decreased by a lot. Words like bait and cannon fodder immediately came to Dalton's mind. He frowned his trademark broom eyebrows. In the past, he was very skilled in making his disobedient subordinates do the same thing. But he did not expect that today it would be his turn to be retribution. Damn it, I have to retreat immediately. No matter what kind of cannon fodder they were, it was always the best choice to leave the battle first. As soon as he thought of it, Dalton made up his mind. His figure flashed, and he hid in the blind spot of his allies. Then he gently turned the bowler hat he was wearing even in the battle on his head. This was the most valuable thing he had exchanged from the demon merchant. As a high-grade enchanted item, the bowler hat could not shoot fireballs or cast a shield, but it could shrink the wearer's body to be shorter than a halfling child, and it could avoid the penalty of strength caused by the size change. With this enchanted equipment, Dalton's second profession became his real trump card. He was a master of shadow thieves who could sneak in the shadows and kill enemies with one move. This was originally impossible for a man who was almost 7 feet tall and suspected to have barbarian blood. Even if he spent a lot of time practicing, he could not offset the effect of his body size on the effect of sneaking. If he could not master the skill of sneaking, he could not become a qualified rogue, let alone a master of shadow thieves. And this was not a world like the Berserker's Creed. The Kang's sneaking technique was not sought after by rogues. Under the effect of the enchanted equipment, Dalton, who was only as tall as a normal person's calf, did not become weaker. Instead, his agility increased a lot because of his smaller body size. He cautiously passed through the gaps between the guards. Even though he was on a crowded battlefield, he still displayed the superb stealth skills of a shadow thief. At this time, the chain demon, who was standing in the rear and observing the battlefield, withdrew from its meditative state. This cruel Batsu demon commander used its bloodline warlock ability and naturally threw a fireball at the Hezru demons who were fighting on the outer wall. However, this fireball did not have the desired effect. Before it fell on the Tana, a giant hand grabbed it like grabbing an apple and stuffed it into the mouth of a howling dretch next to it. The dretch's intestines were pierced through after a muffled pop, but the one who caused all this was laughing at the shank on the wall with its mouth full of sharp teeth. But the Hezru's mockery was immediately drowned out by a louder sound. This part of the battlefield that had fallen into a bitter battle and the situation was tipping in favor of the demons suddenly erupted with a series of loud explosions. Lines of fire spread out from the cracks of the bricks on the city walls. It was like a fast-growing vine covering the entire area of the battle outside the city. Before the two sides could react, the lines of fire turned into gushing flames and exploding gravel. From the bottom to the top, a destructive flame mixed with gravel and flesh erupted. It was as if a volcano buried under the ground had just erupted. The impact of the explosion even shook the inner city wall. Fortunately, a large number of cast iron components were used to reinforce it. Otherwise, it would have ended up like the collapsed watchtower. In addition to keys and mechanical puppet number 21, only the chain demon stood on the wall. The other guards, including the 3 ogre brothers, were shaken to the ground. One could imagine how much damage those unlucky people who were directly above the explosion site had suffered. Art is an explosion. This scene seemed to have stimulated the chain demon. His eyes were wide open, and the chains on his arms were like vipers fighting to spit out their tongues. He was like a neurotic wizard, and the purgatory words that came out of his mouth seemed to return the mockery that the Hezru demons had just thrown at him. Attack! 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 Chapter 40. Avernus, the first layer of Bator, was a place where fireballs would fall from the sky. There was never a shortage of sulfur and saltpeter, and the smart demons had long mastered the technique of making explosives. When building the second layer of the city walls, the chained devil had sent his trusted subordinates to bury a large number of explosives beneath the walls. This was so that they could blast at the right time to deal a heavy blow to the demons attacking the city. As for whether their allies would be hurt, it was not a test of morality for the demons. Moreover, some otherworldly mercenaries with spellcasting abilities were able to escape from the blast range and were unharmed. On the other hand, some barbed demons were left behind at the blast site. The dozen or so demons who were ordered by the chained devil to supervise the Battle of Broombrows and his gang were left behind. While the Batsa demons were immune to fire damage, the debris and shockwaves from the blast were enough to tear them apart. After all, this was Bator and not the material plane. Demons who were killed could not resurrect after 99 years. Just like the Tana re-demons who were killed in the abyss, the demons who died in Bator would die at the end of their lives. Without needing the chained devil to give specific orders, the Batsu demons' prearranged tactical deployment was carried out in an orderly manner. First, the Hellscream, a weapon of mass destruction with a Chinibian aim, was pushed up the battlements by the demons and loaded with cannonballs and packs of explosives. After that, the crossbowmen on the walls began to focus their firepower on the Vrock demons who escaped because they were flying in the sky. The Tana re-demons were more mobile and could affect the battle plan, so they had to be dealt with in advance. The last to be deployed was the Chained Devil's trump card, a small team of fire elemental giants. These giants, which were as tall as 4-story buildings, were the only otherworldly mercenaries that the Chained Devil had to pay for with military funds. But judging from their actual combat strength, it was a worthwhile trade. After paying enough, the mercenaries walked out of the burning gate that connected to the fire elemental plane. The leader of the team was a fire elemental war priest, followed by 3 fire elemental warriors with scorching greatswords and a fire elemental forger with a smoldering hammer. They should be the regular army of a faction in the fire elemental plane. They're here to make some extra money. Keyes guessed when he saw that the fire elemental giants were neatly dressed in half-body armor and steel helmets. The weapons in their hands were not as casual as the fire elemental giants. Attack! All the demons in the pit are your targets, the Chained Devil excitedly ordered when he saw his trump card. The leading fire giant war priest replied with a sentence in the fire tribe's language. The prideful fire giant war priest did not bother to reply to a little chained demon in the infernal language, but disdain was disdain. They were also creatures of the lawful evil alignment, so they had no qualms about fulfilling the established contract. The fire elemental priest raised his lava hammer and covered himself, and the 3 melee fire elemental warriors with a flame shield. The fire elemental forger, which belonged to the long-range troop class, threw a ball of burning flames onto the battlefield. This was a recharging spell called Flame Burst. The pit that had just calmed down was once again met with another round of explosions. When the fire elemental warriors jumped into the pit, a part of the armed barbed demon guards were already on standby around the pit, guarding against any demons that might escape. Flames could not harm the Batsa Devil, although the demons at the front of the army had almost all died in the explosion arranged by the Chained Devil. As he had said before, the demons of Tana would not learn a lesson from the disaster that happened to their companions. Instead, after smelling the smell of flesh and blood that drifted out from the burning flames, the demons became even more ferocious. Even the weakest Tana demons wanted to run to the front and kill to their heart's content. At the same time, they wanted to see if they could get some benefits. But now, those cunning and cowardly guys, this was the preface to the habit of the Thanner re-demons when they called the Batsu demons, were constantly shooting out explosive flame shells, which caused some trouble for the demon army's charge. Not all demons could casually use teleportation spells to reach the battlefield in the first place. The Tana re-demons, who had been soaked in the desire to plunder flesh and blood and defeat the demons, had turned a blind eye to the weak demons around them who were blown to pieces by the shells. Look, that's the true face of the stupid and backward Tana. Re-race. They never know when to advance or retreat. Killing these disorganized and chaotic fellows is more troublesome than just slaughtering lambs. We also need to prepare a mass grave for them in advance. Fortunately, we've already prepared it. The big explosion seemed to have piqued the interest of the chained devil. He began to comment on the battle before him. When he was in high spirits, the chained devil's forked tongue would make a hissing sound like a scorpion's tongue, and his fists wrapped in chains would smash on the battlements, leaving a small piece of cracked rock. Of course, whether it was cowardly and cunning or ignorant and backward, these were the slanderous words used by the two evil races who had been fighting each other for countless years. Any other race that had some sense and wanted to survive the bloody war would not believe these words. Anyway, Keyes was not in the mood to listen to the nonsense of the chained devil beside him. As for the others, while the three ogre brothers were simple-minded, they were not stupid enough to believe the nonsense of someone who had betrayed his allies. While the goblin noble Riknaz appeared polite and humble, he had stopped writing on the scroll when the chained demon was spouting nonsense. The fact that he had stopped writing on the scroll was enough to show his true attitude. Villains die from talking too much. This was the final prophecy given by a mechanical construct who had nothing better to do to the chained devil, who looked like he had been through a lot of trials and tribulations, and who loved to spit when he spoke. The racial superiority theory that the commander of the demon camp was touting was not what the demons of Thanner were concerned about. The only problem they were thinking about now was how to quickly kill the Batsa devil, who were born to die, the best and cruelest way. The mind of the original controller of the demon army, Gargantuan the Globrezu, was filled with such tyrannical thoughts. Just when the demons had gained the upper hand in the siege battle, Gargantuan finally succumbed to his nature of enjoying slaughter and destruction. Unable to bear the loneliness, he used a high-level teleportation to come directly to the battle group. Originally, he wanted to mix in with the Devil Legion and leave without attracting the attention of the mechanical warrior monk. But he did not expect that as soon as he teleported over, he would be smacked in the face by the explosion arranged by the chained devil. Although he managed to survive this crisis with his physique, his current situation could no longer be described as miserable. Although his face, which had been smashed by Mechanical Man number 21, was good-looking, it still had a crooked mouth and slanted eyes. Not only that, but because of the violent explosion, the Caliceri of the Globrezu race, which we're proud of, were directly roasted by the flames. Gargantuan now looked like a crab that had been roasted red by the fire. He had already thought that if he could return alive this time, one of the two titles, Gargantuan the Crooked Mouth, or Charcoal Globrezu, would fall on his head, and there was a high probability that both would become his eternal shame. You forced me to do this. Endless anger had burned away the remaining rationality of the relatively powerful Thanner demon, and he used a means of revenge that he would never use under normal circumstances, summoning Thanner Gargantuan wanted to summon an abyssal devil for revenge, and naturally he would not choose a Vrock who was about the same as him or weaker than him. What he wanted to summon was a Baylor. Chapter 41. There were all kinds of powerful demons in the abyss. Even the demons who had already obtained the title of demon prince could not guarantee that they were the strongest. However, if the definition of powerful was expanded to include all races, then the Bela was without a doubt the strongest Tanari demon. This extremely powerful demon was the same as the pit fiends in the Hell of Bator. Most of the time, they existed in the form of a ruler or a vassal of a more powerful existence. They were a surprise force that could decide the outcome of a small battlefield in the Blood War, a product that satisfied the most terrifying imagination of mortals of the lower realms. Gurgen was indeed a gifted Glabrizu. If he had not been miserably parasitized by worms in the Acid Fog Canyon for more than 100 years, with the power he had been silently accumulating, it was very likely that he would have broken through the shackles of the demon evolution tree and become a member of the powerful Baylor race. However, with his strength, if he was willing to provide more magic power or other equivalent offerings when using his innate spell summon Tanari, he could forcibly summon a Baylor, although he generally would not choose such a suicidal act. The last time he summoned a Baylor was when he was besieged by the Firewalker and the cataclysmic swarm army that had evolved from the acid fog worms. As a result, the Baylor that had just appeared casually gave him, the summoner, a high-level dispel spell, making all the defensive spells he had prepared on the battlefield ineffective. Although that fellow was finally besieged to death by the acid fog worms because his high-level teleportation spell was restricted, Gurgen survived. However, that kind of powerful summoned creature that was not under his control at all had left a deep lesson for the Glabrizu. However, after being drowned in the high ground of rationality by the tide of anger, Gurgen was close to madness. His appendages forcefully tore off all his roasted and useless Caliceri. The two Caliceri, one big and one small, were offered as a sacrifice for this cross-level summoning. After chanting the summoning code, the Glabrizu's two Caliceri were swallowed by an invisible force. He seemed to hear the crunching sound of his Caliceri being chewed up. "Oh, so it's a little crab demon summoning me. You got into trouble and got cooked? Ha ha! Let me help you return home." Hearing the word "return home" in the language of the abyss, the beguiling demon turned pale with fright. This word in the language of the abyss did not mean returning to the abyss, but referring to the rebirth of a worm in the blood pool of the abyss due to death. No, Gurgen quickly retreated. He did not want to lose all his power and become an abyssal worm again. Be it Crooked Mouth Gurgen or Charcoal Charm, they were all 100 times stronger than living worm Gurgen. However, the resistance of the weak was nothing more than a joke in the eyes of the strong. A finger with a sharp claw reached out from the void of space and pointed at the Glabrizu. There was no strong light or ray. It seemed to be just a casual finger. The Glabriz could not help but use all of her strength and her two remaining appendages to cover her mouth. Internal explosion, a spell-like ability that the powerful Baylor could use once a day. It was equivalent to a level 9 spell cast by a level 20 mage. The effect of the spell could be seen from the miserable state of Gurgen, the Glabrizu who could not hold it in. It was like putting a bunch of cluster bombs in the target's body and then detonating them. Even with the strength of the Glabrizu's body, it could not be immune to the huge energy damage caused by the explosion in the body. The Baylor's mood seemed to be better after it had sent the coward who dared to summon it back to his hometown. However, when the evil demon noticed where it was and saw the fire giant who was wantonly slaughtering the weak Thanner re-demons, the good mood disappeared. "So it's because you can't beat those bats of bastards that you dare to summon me to help you. This is really a disgrace to the great abyss. Damn it!" The Baylor's flame whip swept out and directly strangled the fire giant priest's neck. Although the fire giant was not afraid of fire, the long whip covered with sharp barbs and hard spherical objects still caused great damage to the priest. In pain, the fire giant priest instinctively wanted to untie the restraint on his neck, but an irresistible force directly pulled him off the ground. A beheading sword like a flame beam cut through the fire giant priest's neck like a hot knife cutting through butter. The giant head with long orange hair flew into the air. In just one blow, the leader of the fire giant team died in the hands of the powerful demon, who was only half his height. Ha ha ha! The pleasure brought by the slaughter made the flames burning on the horns on the Baylor's head more vigorous. It stared at the remaining fire giants on the battlefield and roared in the abyssal language, "Order!" Ah! This was a common tactic used by the Baylor. First, they would kill the most powerful leader of the opponent, and then use the spell Command Deterrence to stun the remaining opponents. Finally, they only needed to raise the beheading sword and slash them one by one. Generally, they could end the battle cleanly, simple and effective. From the perspective of a certain province, the Battle of the Baylor was full of violent aesthetics, but no creature wanted to experience this art of destruction. The first to feel the demon's appearance was the demons of the Batsu people. When the Tana reset foot on the land of Avernus, the law of order in this small area seemed to be disturbed. The powerful Baylor had temporarily polluted the land by itself. Damn it! How can those bastards summon such a monster? The Baylor was so powerful that even the chain demon, who had always been disdainful of the Tana demons, could not help but call it a monster. Because of this huge variable, the chain demon, who was extremely nervous, issued the first temporary combat order in the entire battle. Don't care about the other Tana idiots. Fire all Hellscream at the Baylor. Cover it with firepower. But it turned out that the hasty decision made under extreme nervousness often led to worse consequences. The Baylor was one of the few Tana that was immune to fire, poison, and electric damage at the same time. The fire damage of the Hellscream did not affect it at all, and the kinetic damage of the remaining shells could not completely hit the demon, who moved quickly and used greater teleportation as easily as drinking water. Occasionally, the damage caused by the Baylor's strong body was also resisted by the Baylor. The physical pain caused by this little damage made the intelligent demon more vigilant, and it began to fight with wisdom instead of instinct. Summon the Tana Using greater teleportation, the Baylor left the deep pit covered by the cannons, leaving behind a small group of decapitated fire giants. The Baylor instantly appeared behind the cannons. Instead of attacking rashly, it chose to use a summoning spell to summon another Baylor from the bottomless abyss. All spellcasters and archers, focus fire from afar. All barbed axemen, hold back these two demons. Also, messengers send out a magical message immediately, say that a Baylor has appeared, and ask for reinforcements. The chained demon quickly gave the order, and then spoke to Keys and Ricknaz in an uncharacteristically commanding tone. The two of you, the situation on the battlefield has changed greatly. We have to work together to defend against the Tana counterattack. This is Avernus, and no demon has ever been able to take down a city here. Even if this is just a small, otherworldly mercenary camp, we can't do it. That was what the chained demon added inwardly. He did not dare to imagine, nor did he want to think, what would happen to him, the acting commander of the camp, if this was the first time he had lost a battle in Bator. Even if I have to die, I can't be buried in a pit of maggots and become a brainless lesser demon or a lowly demon who has lost all 5 senses in a torture chamber. Death is 100 times better than that. To demons, demotion was the most terrifying punishment. Being demoted to a lesser demon or a lowly demon was worse than death. Chapter 42. At this time, Quest naturally did not have any intention of continuing to slack off. In fact, when the Baylor appeared, he understood that his side had no other choice but to find a way to defeat this powerful demon. Although the chained demons had already sent the order to report the situation here through magical communication with the serious bureaucratic style of the demons, without the so-called battle analysis and voting proposal, they would not send troops or senior demons directly to support. However, when Keys saw the Baylor slaughtering the fire giant mercenaries like cutting vegetables, He understood that even if he transformed into a megalosaurus, he was no match for these powerful demons who were familiar with fighting. On the contrary, it was possible that due to his size, he would be the first target. I can only hope that the spellcasting level of these two demons is not too high, and that they don't have the bonuses of other professions. The Blue Dragon Boy remembered that apart from the strength of these high-ranked demons, some of them were especially powerful and had special advanced professions. If that was the case, with the current strength of his side, it was almost impossible to win. Keyes currently had two trump cards. One was the powerful dissociation that he learned from the legendary Megalosaurus Sirota before coming to Bator. After Sirota's modification, this was the most powerful single-target spell under the legendary spell. Keyes had always kept it in mind. Even the incarnations of gods and divine creatures would have a certain probability of turning into ashes if they were hit by this powerful dissociation. The second trump card was his newly developed Keyes railgun. Currently, he had more than 10,000 rounds of various warheads in the camp's blacksmith shop. The storm formed by the metal bullets should be enough to deal with the Baylor for a while. As long as he was not cut to the back, he could completely act as a cannon and continuously deal damage. However, this required a powerful front line. Keyes locked his gaze on mechanical puppet number 21, who was stretching its arms and legs in a strange, so-called preparation exercise. He had never thought of letting the ogre narrow charge in front. In fact, other than the mechanical puppet warriors who were almost at the legendary monk level, who were qualified to fight the Baylor face-to-face, the others were just sending their heads to the monster. Understood. The greater the power, the greater the responsibility. This is what a good old man said. I don't disagree. Mechanical puppet number 21 noticed Keyes's inquiring gaze and did not show any hesitation or refusal. The red light in his metal eye sockets flickered, as if he was looking forward to the fierce battle that was to come. Ricknaz, don't you want to test the prototype? Those two demons look like good test subjects. Before the goblin could reply, a crossbow arrow suddenly shot from a hidden corner. Fortunately, Ricknaz had been holding the small enchanted umbrella. The surface of the umbrella lightly blocked the crossbow arrow and sent it flying. But this was not the end. From another angle, another crossbow arrow came out. The target was also very clear. It was still the goblin noble who was protected by many half-golem guards. Mechanical puppet number 21, who was quick to react, directly pulled the ocean priestess to block the second sneak attack for the goblin. Although the female Sawajan spellcaster's body was covered in scales and had a good defensive effect, the attack still tore open her skin and flesh. The power of hell attached to the crossbow arrow made her feel extreme pain. She did not dare to fight against number 20, who used her as a shield. The Sawajan poured her anger on the sneak attacker. She raised her hand and used a combat divine spell that she often used, Ghost Bite. Two shark-men condensed out of thin air, each biting off the heads of the two barbed demons who shot the crossbow arrow. Be careful, this is the Baylor's telekinesis ability, Keyes loudly explained to everyone. Although the Baylor was still being focused on by the demon army, this level of battle was not difficult for them. They even had the spare energy to remotely control some miscellaneous soldiers to disrupt the demon commander's formation during the gaps in the battle. Keyes suspected that these two demons already had the idea of wiping out this Batsa camp. If not, they would have teleported to the side of the commander of their camp and used the beheading sword and flame whip to vent their terrifying combat power. This deduction did not affect Keyes' spellcasting. He used a chaos protection barrier. After the Sawajan Ocean priestess healed her wounds, she also recognized the current situation. Needless to say, she added a group elemental damage protection effect to Ricknaz, the other half-golem guards, and even the three ogre brothers to prevent the extra damage caused by the Baler's protective flames during battle. Seeing his army disappear at a speed visible to the naked eye under the slaughter of the two Balers, the chained demon seemed to have made up his mind. He directly let the two elite barbed demon guards who were loyal to him step out and carried out a promotion ceremony for them in front of everyone. Demons could directly use the power they had accumulated to promote the lower demons who were loyal to them, but they did not have the opportunity to do so. The chained demon went all out in order to increase the power to fight against the Baler. He had lost everything. With the infusion of sufficient power, the promotion ceremony ended in a few seconds. The two newly promoted chained demons walked out of the ritual circle, looked at each other, and bowed to their original commander to show their loyalty. Immediately launch a general attack. You two rush up and replace those barbed demons. Let them stop the other demons first. How could the demons be kind? Giving power for no reason would be compensated with their lives. The two newly promoted chained demons growled and helplessly chose to carry out this mission that had almost no chance of survival. To the demons, the punishment of being demoted was more terrifying than letting them die. Of course, it was not just the two newly promoted chained demons who acted as the tanks in the front line. The chained demon acting commander followed closely behind, and the golem also rushed up after signaling to Riknaz. Neru, who was stimulated by the battle, did not restrain himself. While his brothers were not paying attention, he also rushed directly to the battlefield where the Baler was fighting. There's no choice. Let's go together. Keyes used practical actions to reply to his two ogre companions who were looking at him anxiously. I'm really fated to be a melee fighter. Even if I want to be a mage, I have to be a melee mage. The blue dragon youth did not forget to snatch the spear in the hands of a guard beside him as he charged. He hoped that the secret of increasing luck that had been passed down since ancient times would not let him down. I didn't expect to see the bond between companions in this place. How surprising. The goblin Riknaz recorded a few words on a new scroll and threw it to a half-golem guard. He seemed to be talking to himself. Although Mr. 21 has a body of steel and is invulnerable, the material of the storage box in front of his chest does not seem to be available at that time. The material used is very ordinary. Hearing this sentence, the Sahuagin priestess seemed to have been hit by a spell. Her body stiffened. When she released the group elemental damage spell just now, she seemed to have missed a fellow that she hated so much, and that fellow had her heart hidden in his body. If he was killed by the Baler or captured like that, wouldn't it mean that she had also fallen into the hands of that existence? The female Sahuagin, who instantly thought of this, felt as if her fate was being choked by the throat. She could not help but let out a high-pitched scream. She looked resentfully at the goblin noble, who was hiding in the center of the half-golem guard's encirclement. Then she could only accept her fate and rush into the battle. Chapter 43. The enemy will reach the battlefield in 30 seconds. Mechanical puppet number 21 was still the first wave to reach the battlefield. After it habitually issued an electronic voice that seemed to remind the Baler, it did not hesitate to hit the opponent's face with its iron fist. But Keyes, who heard its strange words, felt more and more that he needed to find time to talk to it. The Baler, whose face was punched by number 21, went crazy under the sneers of its companions. It abandoned the barbed demon sword-shielded soldiers that it was slaughtering and went straight to the enemy, who seemed to be wearing full armor. It roared in the language of the abyss, "Iron Boy, you're looking for death." Is this a standard sentence for demons? The golem dodged the Baler's embrace and bypassed his open arms. Its iron fists with thorns on them were like inflatable hammers that continuously hit the strong demon's weak armpits. The thorns pierced into the demon's flesh, and the sinister barbs on the surface tore off a large piece of flesh. The immense pain caused the demon to let go of the flaming whip that it was holding. The raging flames that protected its body seemed to be boiling as it exploded from its body. The shockwave disrupted number 21's combo attack, and the demon's beheader sword was now stabbing at number 21's chest. No. Seeing this scene, the Sawajan priest was scared out of her wits. She did not have time to think and quickly released an ice wall. A thick ice wall directly appeared between the tip of the beheading sword and number 20's chest. This level of ice wall could not resist the Baler's strange strength, but there was still a slight delay in his movements. The mechanical puppet warrior seemed to have no hindrance in its joints. Its upper body twisted, and its arms that had hidden sharp blades spun like a meat grinder. With the demon's body as the axis, it turned half a circle and took away a large piece of flesh. At this time, the other Baler also knew that it had met a strong opponent. It no longer sneered at its own kind, but found the right time to aim at the mechanical puppet warrior and threw out its flame whip. They did not have the spirit of a knight in a one-on-one fight. Sneak attacks were nothing out of the ordinary for the Baler, but there was a deviation in his long whip. An unusually strong ogre jumped high and grabbed the ankle of the Baler flying in the air, and the huge weight dragged him to the ground. Under the effect of Kiza's dragon strength and bull strength, Neru's strength and defense were greatly improved for a limited time. This ogre actually used his ebony flail to hurt the other leg of the Baler that was about to kick his head. Ah, 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 ah. The Baler let out a painful howl. In pain, the abyssal demon flapped its giant bat wings a few times to stop itself from falling. Then he controlled the flame whip to bind Neru, who was constantly waving the ebony flail trying to bring more damage to his lower body. With a ferocious expression on his face, the Baler held the hilt of the beheading sword with both hands and stabbed at the ogre that was holding his ankle. Unfortunately, this action was interrupted again. The ogre wizard who had entered the battle shot an acid ball from the troll's skull staff and hit the Baler. The strong acid and quick-acting adhesive covered the demon's arms that were holding the beheading sword. The damage caused by the strong acid hurt the Baler, but what annoyed him more was that the quick-acting adhesive quickly hardened and covered all the joints that exerted force. No matter how strong he was, it was difficult to use it. It was as if he was hit by a petrification spell, which made him almost unable to move for a moment. The beheading sword that was about to stab out could only stay at the fingertips of both hands. When he was about to burst out the flames to burn the disgusting mucus that made him unable to move for a while, a sharp blade appeared from behind him. The ogre blue had been invisible and was floating in the air, ready to launch a fatal blow. The Baler had constant eyes that could see through most invisibility, illusion, and transformation spells, but he did not have omniscient vision. Therefore, Blue, who always had ideas, came up with a good idea. In the continuous battle, the ogre mage approached the Baler carefully from the blind spot of the Baler's vision, like a clever assassin. When he handed out his wailing harpoon, the sharp blade was less than 1 meter away from the target's brain. However, the experienced Baler adjusted his body in time to prevent this fatal blow. At the most critical moment, the strong Baler turned his head and used his sharp teeth to bite the blade of the wailing harpoon. The experience of life and death stimulated this demon. Originally, it was summoned by another Baler to enjoy the slaughter, but it did not expect to meet such a difficult opponent. The great sense of crisis made it explode with strength, and the muscles all over its body swelled. It held its breath and used all its strength to break free from the binding of the adhesive. Flames erupted from his body, not only incinerating the remaining acid and glue, but also causing Neru, the ogre that had been clinging to his ankle, to let go of him in pain. Internal explosion spell. He was a Thanner, re-demon that was summoned to assist in the battle. except for the Summon Thanner spell, which was restricted and could not be used. Other powerful abilities such as the Internal Explosion spell could be freely used. In the current battle situation, whether it was to vent his anger or to quickly reverse the situation, he had to use the Internal Explosion spell, which could only be used once a day, in order to achieve the effect of a hammer strike. But why did the ogre, who had failed the sneak attack and retreated quickly, seem to be mocking him? The Baler used its constant eyes that could see the ogre carefully and did not find the ogre's illusion or transformation spells. Then, why did the ogre dare to face an abyss overlord like him? Was there something that he had not thought of? It seemed that a blue dragon who had not yet reached adulthood was preparing this electric shock spell. But did he not know that the Thanner demons were immune to electric shocks? There was a loud bang. This was the sound of an oval-shaped cannonball exploding after breaking through the sound barrier. Under the effect of the strong electric field that Keys had been accumulating for a while, a metal warhead with an initial speed close to 30 times the speed of sound was shot out instantly. In order to make up for the negative bonus of his body tracing master, Keys did not hesitate to use a variety of spells. Eagle Eye to increase the aiming effect, Guidance to improve the stability of the warhead's flight trajectory, First Strike to increase the probability of hitting. Under the blessing of multiple spell effects, this metal warhead that had spontaneously combusted due to the friction in the air was like the most lame PUBG player using a headlock cheat. Without a doubt, it directly bombarded the head of the Baler. Capture, limit, backstab, snipe, these were the serial attacks that Keys had prepared for this powerful Baler. A soul-piercing super electromagnetic gun directly blasted the demon's head into pieces that filled the sky. Keys and the others retreated even faster. Be careful of burning explosion. To some extent, this was the Baler's talent spell with the highest damage. After being killed, their bodies would turn into small tactical nuclear bombs, and the violent explosion would play the strongest sound in the glorious and heroic life of this demon. With Key's reminder, the three ogre brothers all retreated quite far away. The flames that always burned on the surface of the Baler's body that had lost its head seemed to have extinguished, and the flames flowed back into the demon's dead body from every pore. The muscles of the body that had dimmed in color swelled a few times and suddenly released the most powerful explosion. Everything within a 30-meter radius, including the thick, rocky ground of Avernus, had been wiped away before they could completely withdraw. Some of the barbed demons that were unfortunately involved were torn apart by the shockwave of the explosion, even though they had fire immunity. This was just like the big explosion that the chained demons gave to the demon army on the city wall, and the power was even more powerful. Chapter 44. The Baler demon did not know if the demons understood the concept of fireworks turn cold, but it felt a chill when it saw the huge fireworks set off by its summoned companion. Under the direct attack of Mechanical Puppet number 21, the harassment of the three Batsu-chained demons, and the support of a Sawajan priest's divine spell, the Baler demon could barely hold on, but it was showing signs of defeat. I can't let it go on like this. From the corner of its eye, it saw that the young blue dragon was preparing to kill its companion with a wave of powerful spray spells. The Baler demon knew that it had to make a decision immediately. With a wave of its hand, it summoned a cloud of death that emitted poison and plague to cover the entire battlefield. This cloud of death prevented others from joining the battle, and at the same time, it hindered Keys's ability to aim, which was lacking in experience. Other than the mechanical puppet, the chained demons and Sawajan sorcerers who were affected retreated while casting spells such as Dispel Disease on themselves. One of the two new chained demons did not seem to be good at casting spells and could only resist the effects of the poison. After a while, it was infected by the strengthened version of the cloud of death summoned by the Baler demon. Its body was wrapped in chains and covered in sores. Soon it died. Use the wind spell to disperse this cloud of death. Keys was maintaining the charge of his railgun. He wanted to fire the heavy oval-shaped warhead, but with his ability, he could not create a powerful electric field in an instant. He reminded the Sahuagin priest loudly. Blue the ogre had not figured out how to simulate the effect of the wind spell due to the problem of his spellcasting system. The Sahuagin who was reminded wanted to cast a spell, but it saw the Baylor demon laughing at it. Not good. The Sahuagin who mistakenly thought that the demon was going to attack, it did not release the wind spell. Instead, it summoned a water elemental guard in front of it. Idiot! The Baylor demon and the blue dragon, who were dealing with the attacks of the mechanical puppet, thought of this word in their minds. Number 21's attack was all-pervasive. The Baylor demon had just released the cloud of death and suffered a few attacks, and it used a few new wounds on its body in exchange for the time to cast the spell. The demon's advanced teleportation ability had long been restricted by the space-sealing magic circle on the chain of the chained demon commander. Otherwise, the two Baylors would not be in a tough fight. Seeing that its intimidation method had succeeded, the Baylor risked adding a few more wounds, exchanging injuries for lives. It used a fierce wind slash to finish off another newly advanced chain demon. After completing this tactical surprise attack, the demon finally had the chance to focus on the attacks of the mechanical puppet. Everyone else, including the chained demon commander who blocked his teleportation ability, could not give him too much pressure. Amber sarcophagus. The Baylor turned his fist into a palm and held number 21's iron fist tightly. He did not care if his skin was torn. This spell had to be in contact with the opponent to take effect. A huge mass of amber was summoned out of thin air by the spell, enveloping the mechanical puppet and quickly hardening. However, this sarcophagus made of translucent amber did not seem to be able to make the mechanical puppet lose its resistance. High heat burst out from every crack of the mechanical puppet's body, gradually melting and hardening the amber. Maze. The demon, of course, had a backup plan. He allowed the enemy to add dozens of wounds to him in exchange for a chance to cast the spell, so that he could banish this powerful mechanical puppet with terrifying close combat ability. Casting the maze, a level 8 spell, originally required about 10 minutes of preparation, but this Baylor demon only used one hand gesture to complete the entire casting process. There was no doubt that he was a well-hidden warlock. Keyes speculated that this demon might also be a spellcaster who specialized in spells. When casting spells of this school, it might even be comparable to the level of a legendary mage. After completing the maze, he casually summoned 2 Boda corpses, confirming Keyes' speculation. The 2 Boda corpses jumped and rushed towards the Sahuagin priest who was casting the wind spell and the blue dragon who was preparing the railgun. Then, the demon focused his attention on the only remaining chained demon on the battlefield. As long as I get rid of this Batsa bastard, I can use the advanced teleportation spell, and the initiative of the battle will be back in my hands. As expected of the Baylor demon, who was known as the strongest demon, the entire tactical deployment of the desperate counterattack was as smooth as flowing water. If he did not see it with his own eyes, it would be hard to believe that such a cunning demon could emerge from the chaotic evil camp that had been full of idiots since ancient times. However, those who faced this demon directly were in trouble. The chained demon commander was now in despair. The whole situation of the battle had taken a huge turn, which made him, a Batsa demon who was in the lawful camp, feel extremely uncomfortable. However, as he shouldered the responsibility of guarding the territory, he could not choose to turn and run at the risk of being demoted to a lowly demon. In fact, he could not escape. After the Baylor demon ordered the summoned Boda corpses to attack the spellcaster, it directly found this cowardly and cunning demon who had just put him in a dangerous situation where he could only fight with the mechanical monster. After losing the shackles of number 21's exquisite martial arts, the Baylor demon's strength that it was proud of had returned to its body. The weak-chained demon in front of it waved its thorny chain like a group of floating seaweed. Even if the seaweed suddenly extended and exploded, wrapping itself into a cocoon made of chains, and the snake-like chains constantly tried to use their fangs to cut its skin, it still looked so ridiculous. Ha 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 ha! As if it thought of something funny, the Baylor demon's ear-piercing laughter came out of the steel cocoon. At the same time, a giant hand covered in dense scales came out of the cocoon. With one hand, it tore apart the wrapping of the chains and grabbed the chained demon that dared to play these tricks. The Baylor demon's beheading sword swung in a circle, and who knew how many chains were broken into two halves? Lifting the struggling demon in front of its eyes and looking at the chains that were constantly being melted by the flames protecting its body, the demon cruelly used the beheading sword as a dagger and inserted it into the chained demon's body bit by bit. Enjoying the moment of abuse that it had obtained with great difficulty, suddenly something that looked like a bomb with a burning fuse was thrown in front of it. The vigilant Baylor demon was not careless. In an instant, it pulled out the beheading sword from the chained demon's body and slashed hard on this strange object. The bomb still exploded, but the power was not as great as the demon expected. The beheading sword he held with one hand did not even tremble because of the slash. However, the real threat of this bomb was not the impact of the explosion at all. Or rather, only a small part of the damage came from this. Light, holy light, glorious light, all of the positive energy words that could be used to describe light were piled up together, and an indescribably intense radiance erupted in Bator, in Avernus in Devil's Town, and in front of this abyssal demon. My eyes hurt. What is this thing? Whether it was the Baylor demon, who was proud of turning the tide of the battle, or the chained demon commander, who was being tortured to the brink of death, both of them could withstand the damage of the strong light due to their evil alignment. Even with the Baylor demon's strong physique, it was still dizzy from the strong light. A goblin-dazzling light bomb filled with 5 quarts, which is 3 pints of the blazing angel's feathers. It's an honorary product of the Wrench family company. The one who answered the questions of the demons was the goblin Renaz, who had hidden within the defensive circle of the half-golems when the battle began. Chapter 45. What is a friend? Mr. 21. Riknaz, who grew up in the Wrench family's workshop, was surrounded by various types of golem workers or half-golem guards. Other than learning various mechanical processing knowledge from his mentors every day, there were very few people who could chat with him. After repairing the language module of the mechanical golem with good intelligence that he picked up by chance, his favorite thing to do was to continue repairing the remaining body of the mechanical golem while chatting with this mechanical golem named 21 on various topics. As long as he could endure the strange words that 21 often said, it was very interesting to communicate with this novel mechanical golem. Even those strange words sometimes seemed to make a lot of sense if one thought about it carefully. Friends are gathering in the mountains and forests together, dividing gold and silver by weight, eating large pieces of meat, drinking wine in a jar. You are talking about bandits and robbers, right? I saw it in The Adventures of the Goblin Gondola. But as early as 200 years ago, the last bandit group in the Empire was wiped out. Riknaz tightened a screw on 21's body. Then, friends are when a kid with a family hereditary disease in his eyes escapes from the village and goes on the evil path. Another kid tries his best to find him back. I remember that the unique skill that the kid often uses is an attack skill called Whirlwind Shuriken. I think I have heard of Shuriken before. It is a throwing weapon. But what is chakra? The curious goblin otaku scientist was once again led astray by the strange words of a certain mechanical golem. The communication with 21 was always the most interesting for Riknaz, because the mechanical golem that was used to going astray could always give the genius mechanical designer of the Wrench family new inspiration. Whirlwind Shuriken. The goblin's glare bomb had no effect on Riknaz. He had already pushed down the goggles on his forehead. The strong light was filtered through the brown crystal lens and weakened to the extent that the creature's eyes could accept. In fact, this goblin noble had retreated into the protective circle of the half-golem guards at the beginning of the battle with the Baler in order to secretly equip the prototype machine, a combat armor that had been created by Riknaz's exquisite skills after the golem provided many ideas about Gundam and the like. The first prototype was a hybrid engine. It was powered by the latest miniature steam engine developed by the Goblin Empire, as well as 30 enchanted energy storage arrays. The circular, semi-enclosed cockpit was made of a variety of composite materials. Dozens of defensive arrays were assembled with enchanted armor, providing the pilot with all-around protection without any blind spots. As for the weapon system of this mecha, apart from being equipped with goblin orbital missiles and other weapons, its two mechanical arms, powered by sufficient power, would strike despair into the hearts of any enemy who attempted to engage in melee combat. Riknaz, who was less than half the size of an adult human, could stand on the same level as the Baler after putting on the mech. However, the goblin's technology had yet to fully analyze the concept of the whirlwind shuriken. However, Riknaz, a brilliant mechanical master, had used a new design to make up for this shortcoming. The small enchanted metal umbrella that he had been holding had transformed into a wheel saw full of sharp saw teeth. At this time, it was spinning rapidly in the special groove on the right forearm of the prototype machine. As the goblin's refined gold stun bullet took effect, the high-speed spinning wheel saw was launched through the steam ejection component, forming the whirlwind shuriken that was no less powerful than the wind attribute chakra introduced by number 21. The target was, of course, the Baler. Riknaz's alchemy goggles could not only protect against strong light, but also had a mechanical aiming system that assisted shooting. Through the electromagnetic remote control technology at close range, it could also constantly adjust the flying angle of the wheel saw. The physical cheat was terrifying. The strong light that erupted from the blazing Templar's feather extract brought great suppression to the Baler of the chaotic evil alignment. The great dizziness even made him stop thinking for a moment. What broke his blank state was severe pain, as if he was cut in half. In fact, he was cut in half by Riknaz's whirlwind shuriken. It was just that the cutting power of the wheel saw was too amazing, and the speed of cutting through the demon's waist was too fast. The pain was only captured by his brain after the damage had been done. Advanced, even if he was seriously injured and cut in half, this powerful demon had not died yet. However, he didn't dare to continue fighting. Anyway, the space lock restriction cast by the chained devil had been broken by him. This Baler now just wanted to quickly teleport away. His teleportation was interrupted, and a metal fist with thorns imprinted on the Baler's face. Familiar position, familiar feeling. Number 21 arrived at the battlefield. The heart of the Sawajin sea priest was stored in a box built with magic and machinery in the body of Golem number 21. This design was not just to control the spellcaster. Its real purpose was to let number 21 extract energy to activate the spell effect that had been imprinted on the enchanted armor. Due to the limitations of the material and the level of the Sawajin spellcaster, only 2 spells could be activated. The Otherworld Gate, the golem exiled by the Baler's Labyrinth spell, had returned to the battlefield through the Otherworld Gate using the Sawajin's heart as a beacon. The other spell effect was Raise and Gan. Turbulent magic energy spurted out from the golem's palm. The pure magic energy, with explosive and cutting attributes, had a close contact with the head of the Baler. This Baler and the companion he summoned ended up in the same state. Perhaps he was more miserable. At least the Baler's head was only smashed, and he didn't taste the pain of being cut in half. The Baler that lost its head or rather the upper half, wanted to capture the golem warrior that attacked at close range. Burn this bastard to death. That was the only thought he had before he died. But this thought did not come to fruition. Keyes, who had dealt with the harassment of the Boda corpse, teleported to the side of the demon's body. A railgun directly blasted the body of the Baylor into a rain of blood before it could be used. Saving is glorious, wasting is shameful. Can't waste a spell that has already been prepared. This was Keyes's explanation to number 21's complaint of friendly harm afterward, but his action of secretly putting away part of the remaining lower half of the Baylor's body made this explanation more suspicious. But fortunately, the two Baylors that suddenly appeared were killed, and the crisis of the camp was finally over. In order to help the Sahuagin shaman that was suddenly drained of a large amount of magic power and was in grave danger under the attacks of the Boda corpses, QYTH replaced the acting commander of the chained demons that had been slaughtered by the Baylor demons. He gave the order to the remaining Barb demons and the other mercenaries from the other planes to eliminate the remaining demon army. This guy still didn't erase the word acting in the end. Keyes could not help but sigh as he looked at the corpse of the chained demon that gradually turned into a pool of bubbling mud due to its death. Chapter 46. Those who survived were satisfied. Quess had obtained full authority to command the mercenary camp from another plane. Not only that, on the other end of the communication circle, the devils of Batsu used prophecy magic to repeatedly confirm that there was indeed a fruitful result of killing two Baylor demons. The soldiers and resources that were lost in the battle were guaranteed to be immediately replenished. Not only that, the Batsa Devil also promised Keyes that they would send an emissary to award Keyes a medal. Vru was appointed to be in charge of logistics. With the replenishment of mercenaries from various planes, there would be plenty of food from different worlds waiting for him to taste. As for the insufficient portions of the mercenaries, naturally, Barthos's special military canned meat would make up for the lack of food. With the convenience of this position, as a gourmet, he could foresee that his recipes would be greatly enriched. In the end, Nero got what he wanted. Although most of the chained demon's protective chains had rusted away along with its body after being killed by the Baylor, there was still a small portion of the animated chains that remained. After obtaining these precious materials from the intermediate demon, the ogre blacksmith stayed in the forge all day long, sweating profusely. He had a dozen ideas on how to use these materials that he needed to experiment with. Seeing that his two brothers had found jobs that they liked, the witch Dr. Paru volunteered to be Keyes' experimental assistant. After the demons attacked the city, they left behind a large amount of materials that were hard to find in the material plane. Some of them were even flesh from the Baylor. After a large number of experiments, Keyes' knowledge of demon anatomy and Paru's new voodoo techniques improved by leaps and bounds every day. As for Mechanical Golem number 21 and Goblin Riknaz, after the battle, they had more ideas about the design of the prototype machine that they had developed together. The two of them worked intensively on making temporary adjustments to the prototype machine. During this period of time, the ogre Nero was the most in contact with them, who also stayed in the forge of the camp. This ogre, who aspired to become the best weaponsmith, had been invited to try out the precision machine tool that the Goblin Riknaz had brought over to process the parts of the prototype machine. He had gotten along well with the Goblin Mechanical Puppet duo, and he had even gifted a portion of the Chain Demon's animated chains to Mechanical Puppet number 21, who was also interested in it. Of course, not everyone was completely unsatisfied. As one of the only two high-tier spellcasters in the camp, the Sahuagin Ocean Shaman had always held a grudge over being captured and turned into a power bank for Golem number 21. Still, she had to spend her energy preparing a substantial amount of electric spells every day to strengthen the half-golem guards, which was why she rarely had a chance, and no one to complain about. These peaceful days were only temporary. Looking at the daily shipment of war resources and the mercenaries from other planes sent by the blood-armored demons, Quest knew that the true test could begin at any moment. The ambush they encountered by the demon vanguard was only the tip of the iceberg of the entire bloody war. Perhaps not long after Avernus fully came into contact with the abyssal plane, his camp might suddenly appear somewhere in the abyss, just like the demon army that had appeared out of nowhere. At that time, this place would truly become an isolated island, facing the onslaught of the Thanner, reed demons alone like the waves in the ocean, perhaps to prove Keyes' conjecture about the impending war. Ever since the two Balors were killed, not only did the demon patrols that provided supplies and the demon convoys that transported mercenaries come to the camp more frequently, but even some merchant groups came to this remote camp to sell their goods. The merchant groups that dared to take advantage of the outbreak of the Blood War and come to the front lines to make a fortune were naturally not made up of creatures from the material plane. The members of the merchant groups were a group of old Anababas and perhaps some Yugoloths that came from the scorching inferno and belonged to the neutral evil faction. They were the bosses behind the scenes. In order to obtain blood money, these fellows wandered the various strongholds of the abyssal plane and the infernal plane. The old Anababas, who were proficient in shape-shifting, always transformed into various beautiful female creatures, especially beautiful elves, so that they could provide some helpful help when discussing the price of goods with their customers. "Oh ho ho, my dear little boy, I guess this must be your first time participating in a blood war. Perhaps this big sister can provide you with some help." The old ghost woman transformed into a wood elf with bronze skin with some green embellishments. She blinked her bright brown eyes and smiled sweetly as she enthusiastically promoted her various treasures to the customers in front of her. "Oh, my dear little boy, I guess this must be your first time participating in a blood war. Perhaps you need an indestructible sword, much better than the one on your waist. What do you think of this sword that once belonged to a high-grade paladin? Or perhaps you don't want to run in front of those cruel Tana barbarians and smell their body odor. I have to say that this is a wise idea. Perhaps you need this equipment, an arcane staff stolen by a legendary thief from the famous Archmage Elminster. With it, you can stand at a distance and shoot all kinds of spells at will. By Yubi, how interesting. Or perhaps he really is a picky customer. Fortunately, Big Sister has enough stock here. For example, this talisman that can help you resist death once. I spent a lot of effort to get this talisman from that stingy death god, Nero. If you like it, I can sell it to you at cost price. It really can be found everywhere. Only $9.98, only $998. Keyes thought. He did not need to look carefully to know that this ugly creature in a good-looking skin was peddling some fake goods. Those fake magic auras would disappear after a few days, but by then, those fellows who went to the battlefield would probably not have the chance to come back and cause trouble for them. The reason why he spent time in contact with these fake merchants was that in addition to producing and selling fake goods, they sometimes played the role of informers. Thanks to the commercial network of Bator and the Abyss, they could occasionally obtain valuable information that was more timely than the spies sent by Bator. Not wanting to continue listening to this old woman's TV shopping sales tactics, Keyes imitated the tone commonly used by demons and said bluntly, "Stop your tricks. Don't waste my time with these lousy things to fool bumpkins. I want to see someone in your caravan who has a say. Maybe I can find something worth spending some money on from her." The old woman did not get angry because she was interrupted because her eyes were attracted by an excellent soul prism that the young man in front of her kept tossing up and down in his hand. Because the soul of the victim was imprisoned in the crystal, it glowed brightly and caught the ugly creature's eye. Demons above, that was the best currency in the underworld. Even in the chaotic, bottomless abyss, that thing was the hard currency of the purchasing power clans. Even the worst soul prism was worth more than 10 gold calamity coins or more than 100 hexahedral steel coins that circulated in the scorching hell. This kind of high-grade currency was very attractive to the demons in the underworld, whether it was to play with it or directly absorb the souls imprisoned in it to strengthen oneself. I can tell that you're a big shot who knows the business. Of course, I'm very honored to serve you. Although the old woman was trying her best to please the customer in front of her, her eyes did not move away from the soul prism that was constantly tossing up and down. But I think you also know that the person in charge of the caravan is usually very busy and not easy to talk to. If you disturb them rashly, there will be some difficulties. Chapter 47. In the lower plains, it was not difficult to get a ghost to grind the mill, especially when it was paid with a hard currency like the soul prism. The old Anababa, who was carrying a huge sum of money, carefully led Quess around a large group of black-hearted fellows who were swindling in the trading area planned by the camp. They walked to a small, unattended tent beside the fence where the caravan had placed the camel beasts. She picked up a heart-shaped amulet that she carried with her and held it in her palm. Then, she used the amulet to fiddle with a row of tassel curtains hanging from the tent's doorframe. It was as if she was playing a harp with a plectrum. "Oh, sir, please don't mind. The president has added many protective spells on it. Only by opening it with the correct key can we avoid some unnecessary trouble." As if she was worried that keys would be slighted because of the delay in opening the door, the old Anababa explained with a smile. The spell on the tassel curtains seemed to be activated by the correct key, and a secret mark appeared on the curtains. The old Anababa quickly activated the secret mark on her amulet. After the two matched, the tent's curtains automatically opened. Under the lead of the old Anababa, they stepped through the tent's door and walked in. At first, Quess thought that this inconspicuous tent would at most have a level 4 Li Aoming's hut attached to it, but when he came in, he found that a level 7 Mordenkainen's mansion was fixed here. Really scammed a lot of money. Stepping on the perfect hexagonal steel floor that was obviously in the style of the scorching inferno, Keyes saw the old Anababa respectfully bowing to the president of the Chamber of Commerce, who was sitting behind a huge desk copying documents. She also introduced some of the requirements of the rich man she brought. As expected, this guy who hid his entire body in a leather-hooded robe with only a jackal-like and dog-like face was the real boss of this Chamber of Commerce. And he was indeed a Yugoloth demon. To be more precise, he was a Yugoloth judge demon. Judge demons were the scribes, file managers, negotiators, and middlemen of the Yugoloth demons in the scorching inferno. Just like the contract fiends who lived in the 9 prisons of Bader, these neutral and evil fiends were born with the ability to speak and write various known languages. However, due to the rules of the Yugoloth society in the scorched inferno, they had to obey the jurisdiction of the adjudicators, who had a higher status but weren't as powerful as them. Many adjudicators chose to leave the scorched inferno and come to the hell of Bator or the bottomless abyss to make a living. This kind of evil spirit was born to be good at manipulating magic skills. Through learning, most of them could become excellent warlocks or magicians. However, in terms of close combat, they were not much stronger than the Combat 5 trash. With their average strength and agility, it was thanks to their brains that they were able to survive in the lower realms. The president of the Judgment Magic Chamber of Commerce didn't even finish listening to the old woman's lengthy explanation. He silently cast a malicious transfiguration spell, temporarily turning the old woman from a beautiful wood elf girl into a small lizard with a forked tongue running around anxiously. For this, the Judgment Magic Chamber of Commerce had no choice but to add another secondary field cage spell. "Hey, look. These female little fellows never know how to be concise and comprehensive. They don't know at all that time is money, is life. They habitually nag and jump up and down whenever they encounter a problem. It's really terrible. The Judge Demon Chamber of Commerce stood up from behind the desk with the scroll in his hand and walked to Keys. He put his palms together and performed a magician's greeting. He saw that the old woman was still struggling in the cage. He seemed to be a little dissatisfied with this rude behavior and made a hand gesture with the beginning of an acid ball. The old woman immediately stopped struggling. Seeing that his deterrence was successful, the Judge Demon Chamber of Commerce revealed a satisfied smile. May I know what you need specifically? I need to estimate the price. Of course, if you use a hard currency like the Soul Prism, as that little fellow said, I can make the decision and give you a VIP discount of 10%. The situation of the opponents in this blood war, the division of forces, whether there is a third party that may participate in the war, as well as the cultivation methods that some high-level warriors commonly use after taking charge of a camp, he would receive a corresponding daily salary and allowance in Batoer. The currency of payment was the Soul Prism. Only then did he know that the chain demons wanted to climb up the ranks so that they could get rid of the meaning of the word agent. This meant that there would be more Soul Prism to take every day, which was greatly beneficial for demons to increase their own strength. This new income gave Keys enough confidence when shopping. He did not want to use those impure souls to strengthen himself, so he was not as stingy as the Batsu when it came to the Soul Prism. It was better for him to make the best use of it. Yes, I understand. The Judge Demon Chamber of Commerce made a gesture, and a quill pen that had automatically recorded the items that Keys mentioned on a scroll stopped writing. The list was dragged by the unseen servant into the hands of the Chamber of Commerce's president. Let's start with the simplest, the cultivation techniques of high-level warriors. Let me think, although he said that he wanted to think, the Judge Demon Chamber of Commerce immediately controlled the unseen servant to take out a small booklet that was not properly bound. To be honest, those boorish men who like to play with swords and spears. Oh, I'm not talking about you. The Judge Demon Chamber of Commerce saw that Keys was dressed in light armor and had a long sword at his waist, and apologized for accidentally offending him. Creatures who are used to close combat, even if they are divine warriors who believe in gods or powerful monks who can cultivate to the highest level and become immortal, still rely on their instincts and some shallow techniques to increase their combat ability. Perhaps their attacks are unstoppable, and their defense is impenetrable, but these abilities, other than the most basic techniques, do not have any other tricks that can be taught. What is powerful is themselves and not their cultivation methods. The Judge Demon Chamber of Commerce suddenly stopped talking and looked at Keys with a, expression. After being rewarded with a calamity coin, the Demon Chamber of Commerce continued his narration. Of course, just like the basic laws of the entire multiverse, chaos and order, good and evil, natural opposites but interdependent. There is also a small group of warriors. Among them, there is a cultivation method that can continuously improve their combat skills. They divide different types of techniques into different fighting schools, among which the most complete system is the White Raven School that is good at group actions and is proficient in joint attacks, the Iron Heart School that prefers fine control of the body and weapons, similar to the Paladins, the Devout School that relies on faith to fight, through training the nerves and the mind, the Steel Soul School that is as good as a Gale in offense and defense, the Rock Dragon School that focuses on increasing strength, destructive power, and defensive power, the Tiger Claw School that stimulates the body's bestial instincts and violently attacks while dodging, the Shadow Hand School that is proficient in concealment and sneak attacks and can use the body to control negative energy and shadow energy, the Twilight School that is known for their sleeping and throwing techniques and rarely loses in one-on-one combat, the Desert Wind School that uses martial arts to control flames and focuses on area of effect damage, These martial arts schools are spread in the remote corners of the multiverse, and there are very few people there. The knowledge of martial arts that occasionally comes from the mouth of the planar travelers, and when it reaches the ears of the knowledgeable scholars, it is mostly superficial names. After all, most planar travelers are skilled spellcasters, and most of them don't know anything about martial arts, or they don't care about them at all. However, it just so happens that I have been to a plane where warriors are rampant. As a Yugoloth merchant who is good at recording, I won't be as superficial as the bumpkins of the material plane. Thus, I have properly recorded some of the knowledge that I traded from the hands of the warriors with extraordinary martial arts. Although it's definitely incomplete, I can guarantee that all the recorded content has been tested with divination magic to ensure that it's accurate and accurate. Moreover, as the saying goes, the less something is precious. Seeing that this judge demon was doing the same TV shopping promotion as the old Anababa under him, Quest hurriedly interrupted him. 20 soul prisms. That is the highest price I can accept. I won't agree to less than 40. Boy, you have to know that knowledge is priceless. Hee, Yugoloth demon, do you think I'm that easy to trick? That book is just a copy of a spell. There are at most 25 soul prisms. Boy, if you miss this opportunity, I'm afraid you will never be able to find this rare knowledge rubbing. 35 soul prisms, fixed price. Can you refund these things within 7 days without a reason? Can you waive delivery fees? Can you have the patience of a customer service lady? The judgment demon didn't understand the first 2 words. He only understood the word customer service lady that Keys used in Inferno language. He originally wanted to reply that his merchant guild had more than 30 old ghost nannies to service. But looking at the fellow locked in the secondary force field cage and recalling the true appearance of the old ghost nannies, he could only helplessly reply Keys with the word no. Although the judgment demon was a greedy and cunning black-hearted merchant, his words were usually consistent with his words and disdained to lie. So, without these after-sales service terms, why should I pay so much money for your incomplete books? Or rather, other than me, who else would pay you even a green corner? Those brainless demons that don't know how to read, or those demons that crave power and more power every day? Or do you think that among the bumpkins that came here from the material plane, who would have the mind to restart their training at the front lines? No one else. This is an absolute buyer's market. As if to strengthen his aura, Keys took a step forward like the judgment demon. This action made the judgment demon, who was useless in close combat, quickly retreat. Friend, even if you did pay a price to obtain this knowledge, but if you can't sell it, you will never get anything in return. As a qualified merchant, you should learn the word stop loss, right? 27 soul prisms, my final bid. What will be used to pay is not the tacky calamity coin, nor is it the silver coin that will act like a poisonous pincer. More importantly, it will be the magnetic coin that will stick to your other hexahedral steel coins and never be separated. Think about the feeling of those beautiful crystals that contain soul power colliding in your money bag. When negotiating, Keys was more demonic than a demon. Using the valuable experience he gained from bargaining with Mobo Merchant on Mobo, the Blue Dragon youth actually made the cunning Yugoloth magic merchant speechless. If there was something like an attribute panel, Keys' skill level in bargaining, clever words, and bluffing would all increase rapidly. Chapter 48. All right, deal. But I would like to ask, are you interested in joining my guild as a training instructor? After receiving a definite negative reply, the judgment fiend could only pass the rubbing to Keth. He then carefully checked the pouch of soul prism that Keth paid for it twice. After confirming that there were no mistakes, he carefully kept it in the inner pocket of his robe, as if it wanted to get back at Lucian. The Yugoloth calmed down and used the two spells, Fox's Cunning and Owl's Insight, on itself to temporarily increase its intelligence and perception. Then a confident smile appeared on its jackal-like face that could scare a child to tears appeared on its face. Eloquent boy, the next exchange of information about the Blood War is a little complicated. First, the Judgment Demon reached into the many pockets of his robe and found some fine sand that glowed with fluorescent light. After throwing it into the air, he chanted a short spell. This was the only spell Keys saw that this demon needed materials and chance to cast. It seems to be some kind of high-level anti-detection spell. Keys made a basic judgment, and at the same time, he was secretly on guard against any sudden attacks. Feeling the vigilance of the boy in front of him, the Judgment Demon explained after finishing his spell, "Don't worry, there won't be any flames or ice that will interfere with our exchange. This is just a small preparation. Before every exchange of information, I will prepare the corresponding anti-detection spell." It's better to be prepared. Keys didn't know if he was explaining his actions or praising the Yugoloth's caution, but he only replied with one sentence. "That's right. It's a good habit to be prepared." The Judgment Demon stroked his few strands of beard as if he was extremely confident in the anti-detection spell he cast. He no longer spoke softly like before. Instead, he used a voice that was between a dog's bark and a wolf's howl to loudly echo Keys's words in the Inferno language. "Boy, I admit that you are indeed an expert when it comes to business. But for the next exchange, I've also made sufficient preparations." Clapping his hands, the unseen servant handed over an hourglass that was only the size of a wine bottle that halflings used to drink. "From now on, every word I say is extremely valuable information about the Blood War. I guarantee that you will feel that it's worth it." However, the Yugoloth merchant snapped his fingers, and the hourglass floated in front of Keys. At the same time, the sand above began to fall. "There's no price for this deal. Now, every time the sand in the hourglass runs out, you have to pay 3 soul prisms. As for whether you are willing to pay the bill or not, boy, you can pick up the hourglass anytime. I won't stop you." As expected, those who could do business in the lower realms were quite capable. They actually knew the tricks of hunger marketing and time-sharing payment. Keys threw the 3 soul prisms into Judgment Fiend's outstretched hand, indicating that he agreed to the trade. The Yugro's magic merchant shook the reward in his hand and revealed a satisfied expression as he slowly said, "That's right. The fact that you're interested in information about the blood battle means that you're not just an ordinary soldier that the devils dragged over from the material plane. According to the information that our merchant guild obtained from the higher-ups of the Batsu people, the acting commander of the camp had already perished in an encounter. The one who replaced him as the actual commander of this camp should be you. This time, it's different from the past. It's not the current Lord of Avernus, Bayer, but the noble evil dragon god, the 5-headed dragon god Tiamat, as the commander of the entire Blood War. This is rare. Even in the entire history of the Blood War, there were not many times that a great, true god participated in it. Other than the issue of the commander, there's something else that's unusual. The location of this battle is not the Gray Plains where battles often break out. The two sides are also not fighting for the control of the 10,000 Abyss Plains and Avernus. This may not match the information that the other devils have revealed to you. The Abyss and Bator are more often evenly matched. There were some signs of infiltration in this war, which had happened several times before. The 9 prisons of Bator's Avernus and a certain level of the Abyss are pushed by someone. It's more likely that it's the work of a demon prince or a demon lord. Some areas overlap. The armies of devils and demons fight each other. The final victor will obtain an additional reward in addition to the faction reward of the Blood War, territory. In this kind of battle, the devils usually have the upper hand. At least in the past, there were only a few infiltration battles that ended with the devils' final victory. Hence, they were captured by Avernus in several levels of the abyss, pulled out of the Chaos faction, and gradually assimilated into Hell. A new land in Hell. At this point, Judgment Fiend stopped talking. The hourglass had already finished. According to the agreement, Kays handed over 3 soul prisms to the evil demon before continuing. This kind of plane infiltration almost always brings great benefits to the devils, but the devils rarely take the initiative to use this kind of battle method. The reason is the huge investment in the early stages that is proportional to the income. According to the statistics of the Batsu's higher-ups, in order to push Avernus to completely overlap with the abyss, it requires the power of a medium god to create a complete avatar. This avatar is almost equivalent to a god with weak divine power. Even if it's a partial overlap, it requires at least a weak god to consume a complete avatar. With the strength of a weak divine power of the evil dragon goddess Tiamat, in order to achieve this, it can be said that it will consume a lot of energy. It's important to note that this is only the investment required before the battle, and in order to achieve complete victory, according to past experience, it will require at least 200 years of war. During this period, there may be attacks from other demon lords or even demon princes. Even with the support of the Batsa Devil, the 5-headed dragon queen will have to bear a huge risk in this war. Unless she has a reason to do so, Judgment Fiend stopped talking once again and revealed a smile as if his scheme had succeeded. Keyes, who was eager to know these secrets, could only pay as promised. Boy, or Lord Commander, you have made a wise choice. The most lasting influence a person can hope to leave behind in the Blood War is to become a small footnote in the annals of the war. It's a pity that in billions of years, only a few mortals have such an honor. Of course, those wise gods are not included. Do you know why mortals are mostly cannon fodder in the Blood War? Almost everyone who participates in the Blood War thinks that their own strength is too weak and the scale of the war is too large. But this is only part of the reason. Between the two sides of the war, the merchants of Yugoloth, who have carefully wandered around for many eras, have a different opinion. Mortals are mostly short-sighted and participate in the Blood War in hopes of obtaining power. It's easy for them to become addicted to the battle and give up on thinking. When waving swords and preparing spells occupy all of the brain, leaving no space to think about the true motive of the war, it is also the time when a living being is about to reach the end of the war. But it seems that you are an exception with a clever mind. In order to congratulate your wisdom and to congratulate me for finding a long-term trading partner, the above words will be a discount, and I will not charge you any fees. This time, the Judgment Fiend fiddled with the half-fallen hourglass and let it start counting again. Chapter 49. As a mortal, trying to guess the plans of the gods is definitely a whimsical idea. Even legendary wizards, who are most proficient in language spells, would find it difficult to pry into the true thoughts of those great beings. However, this does not prevent us from trying to deduce the possible motives from another angle. According to Batsa's higher-ups, we have already learned that the target of the Dragon Queen's battle is the 473rd layer of the Abyss, the Acid Fog Canyon plane. The one leading this plane is a new type of Tana, re-demon, known as the Acid Fog Worm. They are created from the souls of countless ignorant followers and evil helpers who fell into the abyss. The one who created this demon officially informed the new demon lord of this layer. It is a giant worm created by the previous Balo lord, and it has successfully defeated and devoured its creator. Its name is the Worm Tyrant. As this plane is too dangerous for ordinary demons, my merchant did not set up a trading point in it. Only the Yugoloth demons of my race who are engaged in shipping on the River Styx have passed on some information regarding this place. The information either cannot be verified, or it sounds very much like rumors. It's just that I found an interesting piece of information among these rumors. Asking for payment again. This Yugoloth merchant was like a web novelist who was good at digging holes. Step by step, he enticed Keys to pay for the information he spoke of. Of course, Keys still chose to continue listening to him. On one hand, his wallet was not an urgent need for now. On the other hand, he felt that the evil demon's words were not all empty words. The judgment demon, who was paid, seemed to have the motivation to continue speaking. That terrifying worm tyrant, after continuously achieving successes that even his predecessor, the Baylor Lord, could not hope to achieve, he set his sights on how to get his hands on the throne of the gods. At the beginning of ruling the Acid Fog Canyon Plain, in order to increase his own strength, he relied on unimaginable tricks to successfully lure a large number of high-ranked spellcasters to become his guests. Then, he turned them all into his little desserts. The desserts that gave him the greatest satisfaction were the large number of dragon-type creatures, especially the evil dragons led by the Penishade dragons. As it had devoured a large number of dragons, it had even evolved some dragon bloodline characteristics. This way, if the devil overlord successfully ascended to godhood, its clergy would most likely be involved in a domain that was threatening to the evil dragon god. As a demon lord, he had the direct favor of the bottomless abyss. If he were to become a great deity, Her Highness Tiamat would have no way to deal with him. Therefore, the Dragon Queen's expedition this time was to gain the initiative by striking first. According to reliable sources, the other dragon gods, even the platinum dragon god Bahamut, the Dragon Queen's enemy, did not want such a person to appear among the dragon gods. His Highness even restricted the fights between the good dragons and the evil dragons during this period of time. A total of 30 soul prisms. After listening to the Yugoloth merchant's information, the soul prism that Keys had accumulated over the past 2 days was no longer enough to pay for his needs. Boy, do you want to owe a reasonable payment to a legitimate Yugoloth merchant? After Keys showed the empty money bag to the judgment demon, the demon's expression suddenly changed. He pulled off the hood that he had been wearing, and the eyes on the jackal-like head flashed coldly. Or, do you want to do a mortgage business? This is also an acceptable way of payment, but there will be a small handling fee. I refuse. Doing a mortgage business with a Yugoloth demon was simply booking his future in advance. Keys did not intend to become a sad person imprisoned in a soul prism. I will pay with a perfect soul prism. The value of a soul prism lay in the imprisoned soul inside, and a perfect soul prism was the product of only completing the last wish of the imprisoned soul. Once this condition was met, the imprisoned soul would also be purified, and the originally impure soul energy would undergo a qualitative change, like rotten wine turning into fine wine. The value of such a soul prism would also increase by leaps and bounds. 73. Normal soul prism. Keys said confidently to the judgment demon, who was captivated by the term perfect soul prism and did not consider the question of how the poor boy could conjure something of a higher value. Before I came, I used a spell to check the real-time official exchange rate of the 9th level of Bator, Nessus. A perfect soul prism is worth 73 normal soul prism. After that, Keys walked towards the maliciously deformed old Anababa, who was trapped by the secondary field cage. The young man's right hand clenched into a fist and directly passed through the barrier, dispelling the old woman's transformation. This scene caused the judgment demon, who was watching from the side, to feel his heart skip a beat. Out of caution, he chose to cast more defensive spells on himself. It's a good habit to be prepared. Keys joked as he silently cast a hold monster spell, nailing the old Anababa, who had just dispelled her maliciously transformed back into an ugly old witch with a pointy nose. Taking out a soul prism that the old Anababa had hidden, Keys explained to the judgment demon beside him. The soul imprisoned in this soul prism was a fellow who had once come to Bator to participate in the blood war, intending to make a fortune from the war. This unfortunate fellow had listened to the deceitful words of some unscrupulous merchants and used his entire fortune to exchange for some so-called divine artifacts. As you can imagine, the huge difference between the seller's show and the buyer's show caused this unfortunate fellow to lose his soul. His greatest wish was to exact his revenge on these unscrupulous merchants. As the explanation ended, Keyes pulled out his sword, the frosty hell iron sword that was tempered by the future master forger ogre, Neru. The sword's weight was reasonable, and it was convenient for slashing. The blade was also very sharp, so it easily chopped off the head of the old Anababa, who was nailed to the ground. Throwing the soul prism in his hand that seemed to have been tempered, and its brilliance had become abnormally pure to the Yugoloth merchant, who was carefully guarding against him, Karth said, "Don't worry." An old Anababa, who had received the most complete training in the art of speech and obtained the title of master salesman. The price in Bader's slave market is 20 normal soul prism. Previously, I still owe you the last 3 normal soul prism. A perfect soul prism is worth 73 soul prism. Mr. Judgment Demon, you should also give me 50 soul prisms. They were currently in a military camp in Bator, and the actual controller of this military camp had demonstrated a spellcasting ability that was on par with, or even stronger than him. The Yugoloth merchant did not dare to go back on his word. Holding the 50 soul prism and the 9-sword sect combat manual, Keyes, who had walked to the door, turned around and said to the Yugoloth merchant, "Mr. Judgment Demon, shouldn't a professional merchant like you say thank you for your patronage or welcome your next visit?" Chapter 50. After the demon's attack was completely defeated, only some bloody bones and rocks were left on the battlefield. The wailing and rotting smell would disappear, and the demons would collect the more complete corpses of the Tana demons to be dissected and studied by the new commander of the camp. Those who still had a breath left would be taken away by the patrols that came to the settlement regularly to add bricks to the skull pillar that was always under construction in Avernus. As for the broken corpses of the demons and the fallen defenders, the fireballs that fell from the sky of Avernus would bury some of them, while the rest would become food for the various wandering creatures of Bator or the captive lowlifes. Perhaps some would even be dragged into some military-canned food processing plant. Who knew? Perhaps it was because of the plentiful results of killing the 2 Balers, but the mercenary camp from another plane had a higher strategic value in the eyes of the Batsidevil bureaucrats. More mercenaries who came from other worlds to participate in the blood war were arranged to be stationed here one after another. Following that, more war resources and supplies were provided, with sufficient manpower. The second layer of the defensive wall that had been destroyed in the battle outside the camp was quickly repaired. Even the third layer of the defensive position was in the process of being built in full swing. All kinds of races gathered here, and the originally isolated and crude camp quickly developed into the embryonic form of a town fortress. Other than the warehouses used to store food and other supplies, the barracks for the mercenaries, and the smithy for the repair and forging of weapons, these were the necessary facilities of a military camp, and the scale was constantly expanding. Small taverns where the mercenaries could drink to their heart's content, open-air gambling dens, and commercial stalls for trading goods had also quietly appeared in the camp. Where there were people, there would be trouble. Not long ago, during the demon army's siege, Dalton, who had relied on his keen observation and flexible mind to escape with his life, had recruited some survivors from the original Broom Eyebrows gang and also gained new followers from other planes. This was another advantage of having a flexible mind. Dalton, who had learned the basic Inferno language, could communicate with the creatures from other planes without much effort. "Boss Dalton, I saw something good over there at those metal spirit peddlers." The one who spoke was a Saronian, It had the head of a deer and the body of a human. It had a kind and beautiful appearance, but in fact, it was a ferocious monster that liked to use its large hands to strangle its enemies to death. Idiot, it's an elven vendor. Dalton, who was picking his nails with a knife, raised his eyebrows and glanced at the guy. He said gloomily, "If you're not nimble enough, that tongue of yours will be useless. In our soft maple city, grilled deer tongue is a famous dish. If you want to control these ferocious guys, you have to be even more ferocious than them." This was Dalton's common technique. "Tell me, what did you see?" "Dragon hide armor. Armor made from the impervious skin of a red dragon." Dalton's original rattan armor was quickly scrapped in close combat with the demons, and he was not used to wearing metal plate armor to fight. Recently, he had been using some inferior goods to deal with it. Therefore, when he heard the news, he was very interested. He immediately brought a group of his subordinates to the stall that sold the dragon leather armor to see what was going on. "Hey, sir, are you also interested in this leather armor? This is the best product made from the strongest red dragon of the Penishade, Megalosaurus. It was tanned repeatedly by many master craftsmen for 49 days and nights to complete." Another old ghost woman who used magic to disguise herself as an elf was promoting her product. Looking at the skeptical look of the customer in front of her, the sales master picked up a broken dagger from her stall. She aimed at the tricky joint of the dragon leather armor and stabbed the dagger with both hands. With a crisp ding, the broken blade of the dagger, which was often used for performances, was damaged again. This is a genuine dragon skin armor. It can be the most solid protection for your little life. The old hag vendor threw the dagger to the side without leaving a trace. Then, as if she was striking while the iron was hot, she said to the customer who had just finished watching her performance, "It is said that the red dragon that was used as the source of the material wailed for 3 days and 3 nights before its skin was completely peeled off. Its painful wailing also lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. This is the secret to making dragon skin armor. After going through this ritual, the dragon skin is already tough and thick, so it won't be damaged by any ordinary iron. It also has a certain degree of resistance against the breath of the fire dragon." "How much?" 2 voices asked at the same time. A weak bandit leader and a young girl who is still wet behind the ears. The 2 people who asked for the price looked at each other and then had an evaluation of each other in their hearts. Not far away, the golem and the ogre Neru, who were also strolling in the commercial area, saw the situation. Number 21 said in an educating tone, "Look, the big guy Neru. Someone is going to be scammed by the old ghost woman again. There is no Consumer Protection Association here, and there are no official customer service staff. If someone is scammed, it will be difficult to find the scammer who slipped away." The ogre blacksmith had bought an expensive weapon from the commercial area because he was excited by the prospect. After he brought it to the workshop and showed it to the golem and Riknaz, he was immediately pointed out by the goblin scholar, who was proficient in all kinds of mechanical processes and had a high professional level, that he had bought a fake. So the ogre dragged his new good friend, the golem warrior, to look for the seller and prepared to argue with him. Unfortunately, the 2 of them wandered around for a long time and did not see the black-hearted seller who sold the fake goods. For safety reasons, once the goods were successfully sold, the old ghost woman would immediately change her appearance after the customer left. If only Paulu or Brew were here, they would definitely remember the person's appearance. If not, they would remember the person's smell. "Hey, that ogre just now is back. Keek keek." At this time, the old ghost woman who had changed her appearance and was holding a dragon leather armor glanced at the person she had successfully scammed from the corner of her eyes. She could not help but feel proud. This was the scene that made her happiest. She stood by the side and admired the regret and annoyance that her scam brought. "Hey, elf girl, did you hear that? How much is this leather armor?" Oh, thank you for your patronage. You can take this high-grade goods that are cleared out for 50 calamity coins." Seeing that someone was about to take the bait again, the old ghost woman quickly withdrew her attention and said with a flattering expression, it was still within the price range that he could afford. Dalton nodded with satisfaction and prepared to pay. A crystal pillar-like currency was thrown to the old ghost woman by the female warrior, who had inquired with Dalton. A soul prism. The quick-witted old Anababa grabbed the high-grade currency of the underworld. After showing an apologetic expression to Dalton, her eyes were attracted by the prismatic crystal in her hand that was shining with soul light. She kept stroking this little cutie that she had only received a few times in her many years of business. When the deer-headed Ceronian subordinate saw that someone dared to intercept his boss, he could not help but jump out and curse. He was ready to show his face in front of his new boss. As soon as he started cursing in the infernal language, he was slapped back down by Dalton. Broom Eyebrows, who had been in Bator for quite some time, was gradually able to easily measure a person's worth, just like when he was in Soft Maple City. This little girl in front of him, who he thought was still wet behind the ears, was able to casually take out a high-grade currency that was worth 50 or more gold coins. It was obvious that she was not an easy person to deal with. The scene of his subordinate offending a big shot and causing trouble for him was still fresh in his mind. Glancing coldly at the deer-headed Ceronian who was trying to insult her, the female warrior who paid with the soul prism said to the old ghost woman, "I want to see the effects of this dragonskin armor. Put it on and show it to me." After receiving the payment, the old ghost woman put on the dragonskin armor neatly and showed it to the female warrior. "Is this dragonskin armor really invulnerable?" "Of course, it has already been tested. Can it really resist the breath of a megalosaurus?" "Of course, this is a red dragon." Chapter 51. Just like the needle-leaf moss in Avernus, it could only emerge for a short while when the rain of fire stopped before it was burned to ashes. The good mood that Quess had just gained from the black-hearted merchant, Eugros, was washed away by this distant relative in a sense. Cryphia, a female adult red dragon who had just reached adulthood, was standing in front of Keys. As the youngest direct descendant of the Dragon Queen and the most favored red dragon bloodline among the five-colored megalosaurus, Cryphia was also a rising star that received a lot of attention in the evil dragon court. The reason why such an important person would condescend to come to this camp was to fulfill the promise that the evil Dragon Council and Batsu's higher-ups had made to Keys for killing the two Baylor demons. Everything had been going smoothly. Cryphia, who had transformed into a female warrior, used her red dragon bloodline and powerful strength as a descendant of a god to pass through the unsafe path alone due to the impending planar infiltration and the harassment of scattered demon armies. She entered the otherworldly mercenary camp under Keys's rule. However, because an unscrupulous old ghost woman peddling dragon leather armor made of red dragon skin, this young and aggressive female red dragon was directly angered. He unsheathed the great sword on his back and executed a cross slash, slicing the old woman into 4 pieces. Still angry, she transformed into her adult red dragon body and used a flame breath to turn half of the business district in the camp to dust. She even wiped out a portion of the otherworldly mercenaries. Although you're not strong enough as a young blue dragon, you don't have to be so polite to that Yugoloth demon just now. I can take care of that guy for you before I leave. The red dragon girl, who had transformed into her human form and was leaning against the wall with her arms crossed, said nonchalantly as she watched Kays persuade the judgment demon, who came to ask for compensation, to leave. Kith frowned as he turned his back to the masculine red dragon, who completely fit the role of a Chinibu girl. He made a helpless expression at the three ogre brothers and the two goblin golem duo before he adjusted his expression and turned back to speak. Officer Kryphia, these are all trivial matters. There's no need to take it to heart. Let's talk about the appointment that you didn't finish talking about. The appointment was made by the Evil Dragon Council and Bardo's first-layer strategic defense attack and logistics department. Kryphia, the Red Dragon, added the name of the Batsa Devil's superior department, which Keys could not remember even with his memory. She straightened her face and said solemnly, based on the wish of the Great Dragon Queen, the Evil Dragon Council, and the Strategic Defense, Attack, and Logistics Bureau of the first level of Batsa Devil have suggested that the primary strategic goal of this bloody battle is to completely destroy all living demonic races on the 473rd level of the Abyss. In order to show her firm tone towards this order, Kryphia drew the huge sword that was as big as a door on her back and stabbed it into the stone floor of the new camp commander's staff room. The wrath of the Megalosaurus shall pour down upon the heads of the demons who dare to offend the Dragon Queen's majesty. The breath of the Pentashade dragon shall purify the plain that is filled with blasphemy, destroy all life, and plunge the earth into the hell of Bator. Then what is the order of the army under my command? Keys was a little speechless as he looked at the female red dragon, who still could not explain the specific details of the appointment. However, he still went along with her tone and asked. Kryphia pressed down on the ball of the huge sword with one hand and pressed it down deeply. The huge sword sank a little deeper into the ground. Based on your achievements in defeating the two Balers, the camp under your command will become the first batch of advanced fortresses after the plain overlaps with the Abyss. You will share this glory with the other 99 camps. You will build a Hell Gate fortress for the army of Bator that can attack from other planes. God have mercy! Keys was originally arranged to be in this remote camp by the old dragon Sorota's connections, so that he could have a higher chance of escaping unscathed. However, for some inexplicable reason, they were attacked by the demonic vanguard, and were forced to fight two Balers. It was not easy to kill the Balers, but they were asked to carry out an even more dangerous mission, parachute airdrop to the enemy's base to open the door. What magic materials are needed to build a Hell Gate fortress? How long does it take to cast the spell? Keys made a final struggle. This was an order directly given by the Evil Dragon Council, and the Batsa Devil, with his strength, he could not resist at all. He could only hope that this mission would not lead to certain death. All Batsu camps will raise lowly demons. Those lowly demons are the most important casting materials. As for the preparation time, 12 spellcasters who can use spells of level 3 and above will be divided into two groups. They will take turns to use all their spell slots to memorize specific spells and continue casting for 3 days and nights. As Kryphia spoke, she gave Keys the design of the Hellgate Fortress and the scroll of specific spells. 10 days and nights. Keys did not forget the terrifying scene when the demonic army attacked the city. In less than 2 hourglasses of battle, almost half of the mercenaries from other planes in the camp were lost. Moreover, that was only the vanguard of the demon Tana, Re. There was no damage caused by the thousands of demons supporting them. If they entered the abyssal plane behind the enemy lines, the number of demons they might encounter would exceed the limits of what a normal person could imagine. Although the casting materials for this spell did not require the stomach pouch of a golden dragon filled with stones or the pituitary epithelium of a giant Teskra beast, Keys did not seem like a great arcanist who could cast spells of level 40 or above. He could already imagine that if he accepted this mission, his group would be like an airdrop box, provoking wave after wave of demons coming to pick up the airdrops. This, Kryphia saw Keys' expression turn from shock to despair. She continued, This mission is not meant to be a suicide mission. This kind of mission isn't to send you to your deaths. In fact, there have been many successful cases of Hell's Gate Fortress in the Blood War. The Batsa Devil's army will hold back most of the forces of that plane for you on the main battlefield. Moreover, more war resources will be ready and will be transported to this camp under your command soon. Also, as a reward for killing the Baylor demon, with the agreement of the Evil Dragon Council, I brought you something. Kryphia carefully took out a heavy bronze chest from her spatial equipment. She first inputted her secret imprint, then signaled Keys to copy her. The Evil Dragon Council has decided to invest more in you as your reward. You will obtain the most basic qualifications to enter the abyssal plane and fight. After inputting 2 correct secret imprints for verification, the mechanism on the bronze box automatically operated. The whole box turned into a magic circle that had been engraved with various runes, and the item that was originally hidden in the bronze box was now quietly floating in the center of the magic circle. Chapter 52. It was a golden heart that was still beating. This is the most valuable harvest of the Evil Dragon Council in the past 100 years, a heart that contains all the power of an ancient golden dragon. Although this was a relic of the Red Dragon race's archenemy, Kryphia could not help but sigh at how lovely the dark golden color was. Just like how the Red Dragon was the most powerful of the 5-colored Megalosaurus, the Golden Dragon was recognized as the strongest of the kind metallic dragons. These metallic dragons could easily grow to over 80 feet long. If their slender necks were included, the Golden Dragon of the same age would look even bigger than the Red Dragon. The old dragons in the council invented this byproduct when they were researching and modifying the descendants of the evil dragons. Kryphia pulled out the greatsword that was embedded in the stone floor and lightly tapped the edge of the magic circle that the bronze box had turned into. You just have to walk up there and activate this magic circle. Then you can begin to fuse with this golden dragon's heart. According to the old dragon's speculations, although you can't fully absorb the power of this heart due to your race, it shouldn't be a problem for you to reach the level of a blue dragon in the prime of your life. Keys looked at the golden dragon's heart that was completely bound by 6 magic rune chains and showed a cautious expression. After using his knowledge of magic to identify only a small part of the magic circle and the rune chain's effects, he directly asked, "Are there any side effects of this fusion? Has there ever been a case where the fusion failed?" "Young dragon, I can't answer your question for now. According to the old dragon's speculations, the most likely side effect is that your body may have some mutations similar to that of a golden dragon. As for whether there have been cases of failure, if you succeed, then there won't be any. Otherwise, you'll be the first case." Kryphia said indifferently. Of course, Quest yearned for greater strength, but rationally, he rejected this method of gaining strength that didn't rely on learning or training, not to mention using his own body as an experiment to enhance his strength. But in this situation, if he did not accept the joint orders of the Evil Dragon Council and the Batsu Devil with the unforgettable name, he could only choose to flee. He did not even know how to leave Avernus. If he chose to accept the orders and did not have a way to strengthen himself in a short period of time, he would die in the hands of the Thanner demons before the demons and Penishade dragons came after him. This was almost certain. The key to breaking out of this situation was to accept the experiment in front of him. After pondering for a moment, Keys took a deep breath and dispelled his transformation according to Kryphia's instructions. Fortunately, the battle staff room was built with such a situation in mind. Quest, who was in his dragon form, wouldn't have to be careful and tear down the place. However, apart from Kryphia, everyone else had to leave the room. Otherwise, there wouldn't be enough space. "Young dragon, I have to say, you're quite talented." Kryphia sized up Keys in his dragon form. She had previously identified the new commander of this camp as a young blue dragon through hormonal signals. However, she was still a little surprised when she saw the young dragon's body. This kind of emotion rarely appeared in red dragons, who were known for their arrogance. The young blue dragon in front of her had far exceeded the size of an average young blue dragon. He was even more muscular than most young red dragons. This phenomenon of exceeding one's age was only seen in a very small number of megalosaurus with astonishing potential. Seeing how strong this young dragon was, Cryphia changed the auxiliary ritual method that the Evil Dragon Council had taught her. Now, let your chest face this magic circle. That's right, that's it. Cryphia directed the oversized young blue dragon to walk to a suitable position. 3 of the runic chains that were originally binding the golden dragon's heart suddenly sank into Keys's chest, as if the layers of thick scales covering it were nothing. It might hurt a little, but according to the old dragons, the more you can stay awake, the better the effect of this ritual will be. You'll also be able to bear more power. Originally, the reason why the Evil Dragon Council had sent this god 3 Chinibu Red Dragon Girl was to avoid causing any harm as much as possible. Knock this little guy out. However, after Cryphia saw Keys's physique, she somehow thought that he could endure the slight pain of the ritual with his own physique. Roar! A loud roar came from the young blue dragon's large mouth. The scales all over his body rose slightly due to the contraction of his muscles due to the immense pain. The runic chains that sank into his chest and the magic engraved on the bronze ritual circle worked. The runic chains dragged the golden dragon's heart like a 6-clawed octopus and squeezed it out of the young blue dragon's chest. The magic on the bronze ritual circle not only froze Keys's struggling body, but also cut off all his roars. Looking at the red dragon Cryphia, who was looking at him with great interest, Keys somehow remembered a crosstalk he had heard a long time ago before he transmigrated. Does it hurt when you get injections? I've had injections for 10 years. Poochie, there's nothing that doesn't hurt. When the bearded nurse in the crosstalk gradually overlapped with the Chinibu Red Dragon Cryphia in front of him, Keys suddenly felt a slight burning sensation replace the sharp pain of his flesh being torn apart. A faint flame gushed out from the hole where the golden dragon's heart was squeezed out of the young blue dragon's chest. Keys smelled a burnt protein smell, and another kind of pain gradually replaced the original one. From eating a coal ball to swallowing a sun, the flame was no longer just flowing out from the hole in his chest. The damaged hole had already healed due to the high temperature, from the gaps of every scale to the shameful cloaca, and even the depths of his almond-yellow pupils. The burning flames surged out. Don't worry, the golden dragon is the same as us red dragons, a megalosaurus of the fire attribute. It's just a small flame. When you fully adapt to the benefits of the flame, you will be able to experience the beauty of bathing in magma. This is normal. Seeing Keys struggling more and more because of the pain, Cryphia wanted to comfort the young blue dragon with words, but she could not say the word phenomenon in the end. The flame that erupted from Keys's body slowly transitioned from the original red-orange to yellow and white, and then quickly turned into a pale blue. Finally, there were even some purple flames. Damn it! Why is the temperature of the flame so high? The red dragon, who had just ridiculed him for bathing in magma, now found that the rocky ground under her feet had really turned into magma. Could it be that this overly strong blue dragon really has the ability to absorb all the life essence of the ancient golden dragon, but the temperature of the flame that he is emitting now is close to the limit that only the ancient red dragon can endure? As the temperature increased, the energy contained in the flame would gradually change from the infrared spectrum to the ultraviolet spectrum that was difficult to distinguish with the naked eye, and so the color would gradually change accordingly. Originally, according to the normal ritual setting, The young blue dragon could only absorb less than half of the energy if he wanted to fuse with the golden dragon heart of an ancient dragon. In other words, Keyes' strength could only reach the level of a middle-aged dragon. However, the theoretical speculation of the modification experiment did not take into account some special circumstances. As Keyes was directly inherited with the ability to adapt when he was in the dragon egg, the golden dragon heart triggered the body to begin a passive evolution. His body instinctively simulated a better way to use this power. I have to think of a way. If this goes on, I will become a dragon-shaped torch. Keyes could feel that every cell in his body was in the process of evolution, from his internal organs to his skin trying to adapt to the high temperature, but there was still no way to effectively control this energy. Under the stimulation of the flame, the electric charges that the blue dragon had stored in various parts of his body also went berserk. Electric arcs, accompanied by the high-temperature flame, formed a terrifying energy web filled with a sense of destruction on the surface of Keyes' body. However, this phenomenon inspired the young blue dragon, who was struggling to think of a solution. Electromagnetic confinement and Tumac magnetic confinement. In any case, Keyes still had the memory of studying science and engineering. He had a preliminary countermeasure in his mind. After trying to use his racial talent for electromagnetic control several times, he finally simulated the electromagnetic confinement field that densely covered every cell. The energy released by the flame was finally restrained in Keyes' body. Kryphia stood on the magma that was gradually beginning to solidify, looking at her own kind that had completely turned into a pitch-black charcoal sculpture because their bodies had been burned to ashes. Did the fusion fail? That shouldn't be. According to those old dragons, the success rate should be very high. The charcoal sculpture suddenly moved. The two hearts trembled together, shaking off the black debris on the surface of Keyes' body. Amidst the rustling sounds, the young blue dragon opened his eyes. His scara blinked. His eyes that were like molten gold flashed for an instant, revealing the moment when lightning and flame resonated. Chapter 53. What did Keyes gain from fusing with a golden dragon's heart? Higher racial potential, stronger physical strength, golden dragon's underwater breathing and medical talents, as well as his control over fire and his near immunity to fire. After his dragon body was melted by the high-temperature flames that broke out of his body, a large amount of burnt ash fell off. This caused Quess, a young blue dragon with an extraordinary physique, to lose a lot of weight. That Chinibu red dragon is finally gone. Keyes chewed on the devil pepper snack that Ogre Brew had prepared for him. Now he could confidently ask all creatures, who else is there, when it came to eating spicy food. He carefully studied the remains of the bronze array that was chiseled out from the cooling lava. After sending off the Chinibu red dragon, Old Annie, the blue dragon, who had transformed back into a young human, and his companions entered a more intense battle preparations. The bronze plate, which was the carrier of the ritual array, was protected by the magic effect and did not melt into liquid copper. Although the array function on it was no longer effective, the portable array technology still gave Keyes, who was determined to become a top spellcaster, a lot of inspiration. Every day, the Blue Dragon youth used the training method recorded in the small booklet he traded with the Yugro's Judgment Fiend to train his martial arts. Apart from studying the physiology of demons with the ogre, Witch Dr. Paulu, he also took out a considerable amount of time to ponder over the enchantment process of this portable magic circle. This arrangement of time meant that he had to greatly reduce the time he had to manage the camp's administrative work. Because of the airdrop battle mission, the Demon's logistics department continued to fill the remote camp with more war resources and mercenaries from different planes. Fortunately, Ogre Brew, who always had an idea, stood up and helped Keyes share the administrative burden. Brew seemed to be very talented in this area. He grafted the methods and experience of cooking to the management of the camp. Just like how he managed the ingredients in the gourmet boxes, he arranged the various materials that were transported to the camp into various warehouses. This ensured the safety of the storage and made it convenient to distribute during battles. The mercenaries who had spontaneously gathered together according to their different planar origins were separated by him. They were rearranged to different gathering places according to their different types of soldiers and abilities, in order to ensure that his orders were carried out and eliminate the possibility of chaos in the camp. Under Keyes' instructions, the higher-ups of the Batsu sent a total of 100 bone demons and divided them into 20 small teams. They led more barbed demon guards to form a military police team named after Brew's beloved weapon, the whaling harpoon. They were responsible for patrolling and resolving various disputes in the camp. Keyes' authority as a commander knew the true names of all the bone demons in the military police team. Under the restriction of the power of the true name, this military police team, which consisted entirely of mid-level Batsa demons as the backbone, could and must completely carry out the arrangements of their manager, the Ogre Blue, under the Ogre's arrangements. Everything in the camp started to become orderly. Order and rules were quickly established in this large camp made up of tens of thousands of mercenaries from other planes. The power brought about by order was immense. Without expending much resources and manpower, they easily annihilated a few small abyssal demon armies that had recently snuck in to launch an attack. This concept was widely acknowledged by the garrison in the camp. The field medical camp that appeared in the following few battles managed to save many otherworldly mercenaries who had been injured in battle with the demons and did not have the powerful recovery abilities of the demons of the lower realms. They could only wait for death, and this system gained the support of most of the soldiers in the camp. It was good to have order. Broombrow's Dalton also agreed with this point of view. He was arranged to be in a vanguard team made up of barbarian fighters. Unfortunately, he was not the leader. Instead, it was a more robust Tauran warrior with half Inferno bloodline. Fortunately, most of his subordinates were also assigned here, so their leader would not be a commander without an army. Dalton did not have any objections to this arrangement. In fact, he appreciated the orderly management style. If the leader of the garrison in Soft Maple City was half as good as the manager here, there wouldn't be so many small gangs popping up all the time and messing up the city. I have to take my brothers everywhere and work as unpaid security guards. His words made the former Broombrow's subordinates agree with him deeply. However, this sense of recognition was more prevalent among Dalton's old brothers. Some of the new and untested subordinates did not even have the most basic loyalty, let alone teamwork. For example, the Saronian villains who had joined Dalton previously refused to listen to Broombrow's orders. Instead, they gathered under another powerful leader in the vanguard team. According to them, they had found the home of their faith. Dalton scoffed at this. A bunch of disloyal and reckless cultist scum. On the small drill ground of the stormtroopers, Dalton sat on a barrel of ale covered with a hemp-woven bag. He and some of his brothers around him watched coldly as the new boss, who was regarded as the home of faith by the Saronians, stood on a podium made of stacked lath and wooden boxes and preached the strange doctrines he believed in Inferno, which he was not very proficient in yet. The new leader of the Saronians had a coyote-like head and dark brown fur with red spots. Sporadic iron rings pierced the surface of his bare chest as decoration. Even when he was giving a speech, he was accompanied by 2 salivating hyenas. This was a cruel and ferocious gnoll. At the same time, he was also a gnoll priest who believed in an evil god. Praise the great Yeenagu. Your people with poisonous fangs will listen to your teachings. The flesh and blood of the weak will be offered, and we will share your glory. Following the words of the gnoll priest, Several humanoid creatures with broken limbs were brought over by his subordinates. These were the victims of the evil ritual they were about to hold. The sources of these victims were either unlucky warriors who came to this foreign mercenary camp alone and were not very strong, or the wounded were stolen from the new medical camp established by Blue the Ogre. The weak do not deserve to live. In the feast of flesh and blood, we offer our most sincere offerings. A group of people who listened to the teachings of the Knoll priest began to beat the victims who fell to the ground. What's more, a few deer-headed Saronians who liked to eat raw meat began to tear some flesh from the victims with their powerful big hands and stuffed it into their mouths and chewed. Under the blessing of the spell effect of the Knoll priest from the evil god, he believed in these victims who had been divided and eaten could not make any sound, not even the slightest wail. As for stopping this evil, please, this was the bloody camp of Bator. How could the creatures who participated in this cruel war have any mercy? It was normal for him to not care about anything that had nothing to do with him. At most, when they felt a little disgusted, they would not look at it. "Boss, it's done." One of Dalton's lackeys ran over from afar. At the sight of the bloody and cruel scene, he was so scared that he shivered all over as he turned around and whispered in his boss's ear. After that, he hurriedly covered his mouth. He was afraid that he would vomit. Dalton gently patted the trembling subordinate, as if to blame this timid behavior. "Little boy, what's there to be afraid of? This is hell, the lair of the devils." As if to confirm the statement of the devil's lair, Dalton had just finished speaking. 6 bone demons directly appeared on the small drill ground belonging to the assault team with a high-level teleportation spell. There was no declaration of guilt or any other nonsense. These bats a devil, who looked like undead creatures, launched a punishment operation. But their method was simpler and more violent. Only slaughter. In order to improve the efficiency of the operation, the bone demons first used ice wall together to imprison the cultists who wanted to escape in a cage made of solid ice a few feet thick. Then, it was as if nothing happened. They went through the ice wall and began their work. Through the ice wall, the assault team, who did not participate in the cult gathering, could clearly see that the bone demons frequently waved their long-handled sides and occasionally used their poisonous tails like poisonous scorpions to poke the villains who were still enjoying the feast of flesh and blood. Under the influence of the bone demons' ferocious attacks and their talent, divine light of fear, all the cultists who were originally feasting on flesh and blood fled desperately. But the ice wall around them, which had no blind spots, trapped them together with the terrible Batsu devil. It was useless to try their best. There was nowhere to escape. The Knoll priest, who had organized the gathering and believed in the evil god, did not escape death either. He and his pet hyena were impaled by the tail of the same bone demon, and the powerful poison harvested the Knoll's life in just a moment. Dalton patted his subordinate who had just returned from the report and was still in a state of shock. He rarely comforted him. "What's the use of being afraid? I've already told you that these cultists deserve to die. How dare they believe in demons and evil gods in the devil's territory? Ignorant fools, aren't they courting death?" Mr. Dalton, Broombrows, had changed from an ignorant country bumpkin to a bloody veteran with some knowledge of the lower plains. This was another arrangement of Brew, who always had an idea. The ogres would select a warrior of a certain level of strength from every camp to act as their eyes, ears, and mouthpiece to monitor the situation from the shadows. Order brought power, and the double order of light and darkness brought twice the power. Note 1. Bone demons, also known as Oceloth. In D&D settings, these Batsa demons that look like undead creatures are the supervisors of the 9 hells driven by hatred, greed, and jealousy. They are also the selectable composition of the supervisory team and the military police. They stand about 9 feet tall, about 3 meters, and weigh about 500 pounds, about 450 pounds. They belong to the middle class of Batsa-Devils. The abilities here are the third version of the ability settings. Chapter 54. The Pillar of Skulls standing on the Avernus Plains had recently harvested even more nourishment. As the large-scale blood war was imminent, Demon Tana generously sent out a large number of human heads in military operations, allowing this huge world tree to grow much faster. At this moment, the evil dragon court sitting in the deep pit at the roots of this thriving world tree was bustling with activity. The large teleportation gate connected to the main battlefield of the Blood War, the Grey Wilderness, had been established. However, in this battle, the main battlefield connected to the Grey Wilderness was only used as a distraction. Meanwhile, the true core of the plan had been deployed. The 100 military fortresses that had proven their worth in the previous battle against the Demon Vanguard were now filled with all kinds of Batsa-Devil and Dragon descendants. They would serve as the vanguard army in the upcoming planar infiltration. They would set up many Hell Gate fortresses in the target of this bloody battle, the 473rd level of the Abyss, the Acid Fog Canyon. According to the calculations of the ancient and even ancient evil dragon members of the Evil Dragon Council, as well as the professionals from the Strategic Attack and Logistics Administration of the first layer of Bator, as long as more than 10 Hell Gate fortresses were built, the Dragon Queen and Bator would have a 90% chance of winning this blood war. At this moment, the legendary blue dragon Sirota, who dominated the Ash Plain, was only one of the several hundred legendary Megalosaurus standing in the Hall of Dragons. There were plenty of Pentashade Megalosaurus that were older and stronger than him in this unusually spacious hall. The ancestor of all the Pentashade Megalosaurus bloodlines, the king they all worshipped, and the god the evil dragons worshipped in name, Pentashade Dragon Queen Tiamat, was quietly crouching in the deepest part of the hall. Of course, this was only a clone of the Dragon Queen, but the size of this clone alone was larger than all the dragons present. Even the strongest primordial red dragon standing at the side was only 1/5 the size of the Dragon Queen's gigantic body that was close to 5,000 meters in size. However, this clone of the Dragon Queen was too lazy to move. She felt tired. Only with all the divine power of this clone could she move Avernus closer to the trajectory of the 473rd layer of the Abyss. This was even after the Evil Dragon Council and the Barth's high-ranking researchers had jointly developed a super-large magic circle that had the effect of amplifying divine power. Otherwise, just the act of pushing the plane would have directly caused the Dragon Queen's avatar to collapse. Perseverance would eventually pay off. After a long period of hard work, those who were qualified to stand in the Hall of Dragons felt a slight change in the laws of the laws. The first layer of Bator, Avernus, had arrived at its predicted location. The law of the Abyss laws of the Abyss began to affect the Blood War Abyss. Everyone attack! The clone of the Dragon Queen in the deepest part of the Hall of Dragons suddenly opened all 10 of her half-closed eyes. Her 5 heads roared in unison as she gave the order to attack. In the bronze fortress, which was protected by 13 layers of walls, the current lord of the first layer of Bator, Bayer, was sitting on an iron throne made of sharp blades. He was sipping on a golden cup that contained a highly poisonous liquor called Gughalakai, brewed from the venom of the purgatory centipede. After hearing the dragon's roar that contained divine power, this strong devil lord covered in dark red scales excitedly gulped down the strong liquor in his hand. He didn't seem to care that his saliva had corroded the golden goblet to the side. Finally, the curtain of a new round of bloody battle is about to open. Pass down the order. The Batsu army of Avernus will quickly pass through the portal and arrive at the Grey Wilderness. Fight. To slaughter. Conquer. Burp. A pit fiend acting as Bayer's messenger forced himself to ignore the terrifying screams of the 12 angelic skulls hanging from his master's waist. using a secret technique to keep them alive. He used the fastest speed he could muster to pass on the order. Keyes, who was in a remote area, received the order even faster than the devils of the Batsu. The moment the clone of the Dragon Queen let out a furious roar, the Penishade Megalosaurus and other dragonkin in Avernus also heard the dragon's roar that contained the power of the evil dragon. The ritual magic structure, which had long been buried by the Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Security Administration of Bader's first-level territory in the mercenary camp under Kitha's jurisdiction in the name of transporting supplies, was immediately activated. Interdimensional Precise Teleportation Anchor was a spell that had been specially developed. It completely covered the land within a radius of nearly 1,000 feet with the entire camp as the center. Under the effects of the planar spell, the entire camp, along with the land covered by the spell, was teleported to the precise location marked by the demon's spies. Only a deep crater was left in the vast plains of Avernus. This style of operation is indeed demonic. This was the umpteenth time Quess had sighed with the same heartfelt exclamation ever since he came to Bardo. He doesn't even have the slightest chance to go back on his word. He's sent straight to the plane. Perhaps he had made sufficient preparations beforehand, but the interplanar teleportation only lasted for a short while before Keyes sensed that he had arrived at his destination. He tidied up his new equipment. He put on the matte mithril enchanted half-armor that had been treated with black fragments from his spontaneous combustion. He loaded the modified double-barreled antique whaling shotgun, which had been loaded with a lot of new bullets. He sorted out the different types of goblin bombs and placed them in a small pouch made of Baylor leather at his waist. He confirmed the status of the railgun ammunition in the newly purchased space ring and the space belt he had bought from Ricknaz. He pulled out the heavy sickle-edged executioner's sword that the ogre blacksmith Neru had forged from adamantine. After several days of research on the portable bronze ritual, Keyes walked out of the command room that had turned into a lava cavern. He climbed up the walls of the camp that had been turned into a fortress. After greeting the 3 ogre brothers and the 2 goblin golem duo, the blue dragon teenager immersed himself in analyzing the current situation. They really know how to pick a place. The camp had been teleported to the center of a miniature basin. It was originally covered by a large area of mushroom plants. The beacon that Batsa Devil spies had set up here in the early stages was indeed difficult to be discovered by the Thanner re-demons due to the many obstructions. However, when Keyes' mercenary camp, no, it should now be called the Mercenary Fortress, was airdropped here through interplanar teleportation, the mushroom forest that was originally used as a cover had become the foundation at the bottom of the fortress. The massive fortress almost completely covered the bottom of the miniature basin. Half of the 3rd layer of fortifications that had been built outside the mercenary camp was embedded in the steep slope at the edge of the basin. This way, the compound formation that could have increased the defensive effect had lost most of its defensive effects. On the other hand, Thanner Ree's army could launch a diving attack from the slope of the basin. We can only fight for a while. Hopefully, our previous arrangements will be effective. Before Keyes could think of a strategy to use to make up for the massive hole in their defenses, the Thanner demons that had been patrolling the basin began to launch sporadic attacks on the fortress. Unlike the demon vanguard that they had encountered in Avernus, the first demons that the blue dragon teenager saw while leaning on the battlements were not the infamous weaklings like the dretches and quasits that were commonly seen in the bottomless abyss. A few groups of Bugala demons that lived on the slopes and in the mushroom forest at the bottom of the basin were the first to sense the aura of order that belonged to Bator. These demons with higher perception seemed to have noticed the red smoke rising from the airdrop boxes. They climbed or leaped from their original habitat towards the fortress and swept over. The souls that fell into the abyss and became Bugala demons were mostly thugs and hooligans that believed in violence above all else. Their demon form showed even more of their barbaric and brutal nature. The Bugala demons had a terrifying face, a huge gorilla with a collapsed face and fangs. Their body shape was a classic example of 8 feet tall and 8 feet in circumference. Without the ability to fly, they could only walk on land. But when they climbed between the vines of the mountains and jungles, they had unexpected speed and agility. And these demons were different from most of the Thanner re-demons. They were particularly suited to cooperate with their own kind and fight the enemy together. At this time, the Bugala demons on the slopes at the edge of the basin took advantage of their height and constantly grabbed any stones that could be lifted from the rock walls and threw them to harass the defenders who had already lined up on the wall. Even though the smaller rocks were better than nothing, the defenders still had to be careful to avoid some of the millstone-sized rocks that were occasionally thrown, which caused them to be somewhat troublesome. On the other side, the Bugala demons that attacked at the same time took advantage of the harassment of their own kind on the hillside to quickly weave some simple climbing tools with vines. At the same time, they also pulled out some mushroom-like plants with umbrella-shaped caps and used them as shields on their heads. They then launched an ant attack on the defenders, who had just finished lining up on the third layer of the outer wall of the fortress. The silverback gorilla-like demons' teamwork was rather perfect. This surprised the current commander of the mercenary fortress, Keys. However, this dessert before the meal attack was not enough to shake the war machines inherited from the 9 prisons of Bader. First, the barbed crossbowmen in the fortress were on standby. After a barrage of hellish bolts, they basically wiped out the Bugala demons that had launched a feint attack on the hillside. Then, on the other side, the Bugala demons that were attacking the city like ants were about to jump over the city wall with their mushroom umbrellas as shields. But all of them were ignited by the spray of atomized fuel and electric ignition devices that were spurting out from inside the city wall. This move came from the creation of the great goblin engineer and mechanical expert, Rick Naz. It was simply done by burying hydraulic fuel pipes and nozzles. With the help of several spellcasters, it did not take up any spell slots to cast the level 0 spell Tremor Shock. This created an effect that was not inferior to the level 8 evocation spell Burning Cloud. It was just that it was not convenient to move freely, but this was not a problem for the defenders. As for the Bugala gorillas that were struggling in the flames, they were easily killed by the spears and arrows of the defenders. Only a few Bugala demons were lucky enough to escape and hide in the depths of the mushroom forest. Chapter 55. The 3,451st experiment has failed. The reason for the failure is unknown, but it has been proven that using the phylactery reincarnation method is unable to escape from the parasitic acid mist worm. Damn worm! After completing the summary and analysis of the experiment in the spellbook, Sneyd Benra, who had already transformed into a lich, habitually added this summary curse. Sneyd Benra was the eldest son of the former matriarch of the first family of the Drow Elves in Morseblight City in the Underdark. When his life was about to end, this drow mage drank a special potion mixed with venom and the blood of sacrifices. After a magic ritual, he successfully transformed himself into an undead creature that lived in another form, a lich, whether it was before or after his death, even in a race like the drow, where women's rights were paramount. After being immersed in the path of magic for many years, he was always able to provide a way of life for himself. However, this wonderful time was gone after a trip to a foreign land for teaching. The demon lord of the 473rd layer of the abyss, the tyrant worm, after tricking thousands of powerful spellcasters for his learning in order to recoup his previous investment, he bestowed almost all of his teachers with the glory of being one with the noble demon lord. Goddess Lolth blessed him. Sneyd Benra was neither the demon lord's favorite meal, all kinds of powerful true dragons, nor was he an investment target that needed to be recouped, such as some Netherese survivors. A lich had no meat on his body. He was so thin that he was just skin and bones. Other than the crunch, there was no taste of chicken. He was lucky enough to escape the fate of being devoured, but unfortunately, the tyrant worm used some of his flesh and blood on the spot to turn him into parasitic acid mist worms. He was also arranged to look after a small part of the demon lord's huge territory as a shepherd dog to look after the parasitic lambs of the other Thanner re-demons. Of course, Lich Sneyd wanted to escape, but being parasitized by the demon lord who ruled the Acid Mist Canyon was equivalent to being firmly bound to this layer of the plane. No matter if he used a teleportation spell or used the ferry boat of the Nether River Soul Demon to smuggle himself out, as long as he still had parasitic acid mist worms on him, he would be immediately teleported back once he left this plane. Without exception, there was no way to escape. After many fruitless attempts, the Lich began to search for a way to deal with this parasite using his own knowledge. However, as the tyrant worm tyrant's first-generation flesh and blood clones, these parasites had all sorts of incredible abilities. Regardless of whether it was physically extracted or self-destructed by various evocation spells, it was as if there was a hidden worm nest in the Lich's body. Every time the Lich was dealt with, the worms would immediately reappear. All kinds of experiments had been going on for hundreds of years, and the Lich had already tried thousands of experiments. Fortunately, he had already turned into an undead creature. Otherwise, just focusing on the same problem for such a long period of time could drive ordinary creatures crazy. In the latest experiment, Lich Sneyd carefully controlled the field spell to grind his entire body into powder. Then, he used the preset disintegration magic array to turn the powder into nothingness. However, after the self-destruction, Sneyd, who had consumed the soul energy stored in his phylactery, found that those damn parasites had reappeared with him. Damn it! Could it be that these bugs are bound to my soul? After recording the summary of the experiment, the Lich began to put on his dark red robe that had become wrinkled due to the lack of time to take care of it for hundreds of years. But suddenly, his hands paused in the middle of putting on his clothes. He began to quickly flip through the previous experiment records. The essence of the Thanner re-demons was a fallen soul under the influence of the law of chaos. Therefore, their souls and bodies were unified, and even the demon lord was no exception. Therefore, it could really be like this. I used to think that these things didn't have intelligence and shouldn't have souls. Therefore, I used all kinds of methods to destroy these parasites. Even if I used the phylactery to reincarnate, there was no way to get rid of these maggots. That's right. It must be like this. Thinking of the hope of escaping from the demon lord, the two soul flames in the Lich's eye sockets burned more vigorously. He hurriedly copied this conjecture and the theoretical basis in his spell book, and he didn't even stop to exclaim. Just when the invigorated Sneyd was about to immediately start a new experiment design, the communication array inlaid on the wall of the underground secret laboratory cum storage room had a commotion. Master Sneyd, something bad has happened. What happened? Didn't I say not to disturb me when I'm doing my research? Even the dullest creatures could feel the strong dissatisfaction in the Lich's empty voice. Standing on the other side of the communication array was Sneyd's gargoyle butler. Master, something happened in the Xuanlin Basin. Those ape demons were attacked by suspected demons. Feeling his master's dissatisfaction, the gargoyle quickly stated the facts in concise and comprehensive words. That's his attack. Following the words in the communication array, the Lich directly appeared in front of the gargoyle. This is the 473rd floor of the Abyss. Have the demons already pushed the bloody war here? Master, I've brought those Bagoo ape demons for you to identify. The gargoyle carefully organized his words. When Sneyd saw a few Bagoo demons who were burned like skinned monkeys being dragged into the stone room by a few gargoyles, he directly cast a spell to deprive the souls of these demons. Sure enough, the souls and bodies of lower creatures, like demons, are one. Seeing the bodies of the Bagoo demons being deprived of their souls and immediately turning into a pool of green foam, the Lich was even more convinced of his previous conjecture. After playing with the souls of these Bagoo demons for a while, he figured out what had happened to them. Sneyd grabbed a squirming acid mist worm from his body and fiercely stuffed it into his mouth to chew carefully, as if he wanted to use his lost taste to taste the flesh again. Gargoyle, gather those Tana Re that are used to raise worms. Tell them that the bloody war has spread here, and that the demons are around. After saying that, he threw a few Bagoo demons' soul flames that were jumping on his fingertips into the body of a skeleton soldier that was wandering in the stone room. Demonic possession. Fusing the soul of a demon or demon from the lower realm into an undead creature's spell. If successful, the undead creature would obtain the corresponding power of a creature from the lower realm. However, there were few precedents of putting a few souls into an undead creature's body. Generally, spellcasters would not choose weak undead creatures like skeleton soldiers as the host of demonic souls. Oh, the experiment seems to be a success. Seeing that more heads grew on the skeleton soldier's body after being parasitized by several demon souls, the drow lich Sneyd burst into a rare wild laughter under the gargoyle butler's puzzled gaze. Ha ha ha! Soul! Demon soul! Let me see how to cleanse this parasitism. Perhaps this master has really been driven mad by his own research. The gargoyle butler suddenly had this thought, but immediately suppressed it carefully. After all, the mad lich was also a lich, and perhaps even more terrifying. Chapter 56. When my best friend number 21 and I first set foot on the land of the bottomless abyss, the welcoming ceremony was held by some rather comical-looking monkeys. Number 21 insisted on calling them King Kong. Commander Keys later told us that they were actually a type of Thanner Re-demon called Bugala. Just as I finished setting up the prototype robot and prepared to deal with the demon army that was about to swarm us, a voice suddenly rang out. A strange-looking undead creature has appeared in my scope. Report of the bloody Battle of Riknaz front line, Arbus Volume. Chapter 11. After defeating the attack of the Bugala demons, Keys stood on the walls of his airdropped fortress and waited for more demons to arrive. All the mercenaries in the fortress, even the reserve teams arranged to wait in ambush in the cave, were on high alert, ready to attack at any time. According to Brew's arrangements, there were veterans in each squad who had participated in the battle in Avernus. These veterans naturally told the newcomers about the grim situation of the battle with the devils. Every archer was checking their crossbows and arrows. Every warrior tied the leather straps on their armor again and again, repeatedly making sure that the weapons in their hands were sharp and sturdy enough. Anyone who had the ability to cast spells, be it mages, warlocks, priests, druids, forest rangers, etc., were all silently reciting the incantations that they had prepared beforehand, seizing every moment to revise. It was busy and tense, yet orderly. The one who broke the silence before the great battle was a strange undead creature with 3 ape heads and 6 arms. Xiaolong. No, Commander. May I ask if you are the 3rd child in your family? The mechanical warrior, who had been silent since the start of the battle, moved closer to Keys and asked softly. First, all the blue dragon hatched in the same batch were born at the same time, so there was no sibling ranking. Second, the place where I was born was very far from the sea, and there was no place called Chuntang Pass nearby. Keys answered without turning his head. That's good. Hmm. Although the three Ogre brothers and Ricknaz still couldn't understand these words, they were happy to see that someone finally caught up with number 21's strange thought process. It could be said that it was an integrated circuit. The guards on the periphery didn't know what the higher-ups of the fortress were thinking at this moment. They were still very careful when dealing with undead creatures standing outside the shooting range. Perhaps this strange, undead creature was some kind of rare demon. Old Bull, be careful later. I heard from the people above that this place is actually the lair of a worm-like demon. That fellow is obviously not. As the vanguard, Broom browsed Dalton, and his brothers were arranged to wait in the cave. Due to his excellent eyesight, he had already seen what the enemy looked like through the observation holes on the city walls. Thus, he carefully reminded the Tauren beside him, who was the leader of the assault team. After a few days of contact, Dalton knew that this boar was too impulsive. I already know. The Tauren replied smoothly on the surface. At this moment, the undead creature with 3 heads and 6 arms was standing alone outside the shooting range of the fortress's crossbow. If they didn't use cannons or spellcasters, the defenders would have no way to effectively attack it from such a long distance. This was the half-undead, half-demon creature that Lich Snade had casually created by injecting the souls of several Bugala demons into the bodies of skeleton soldiers. Although it had the skulls of 3 ape demons, it didn't have much intelligence in essence. The reason why it could stay shrewdly outside the long-range attack range was that there was an evil drows manipulating its actions behind the scenes. The war between the drows was usually similar to a ritualistic religious activity. When the war started, there would be voluntary or involuntary elite warriors who would demonstrate in front of the enemy's formation and attract their attention. The real war began when the masters of martial arts who obeyed the command of the drows stabbed the enemy's throat from the darkness with daggers, and when the slave army quietly surrounded and launched a sudden attack from all corners. Even after becoming a lich, Snade was still used to following the fine traditions of his original race. When the defenders saw the undead with 3 heads and 6 arms charging, the real enemy appeared from the ground and the sky at the same time that they didn't pay attention to. A large area of the ground between the 3rd and 2nd layer of defense walls suddenly collapsed, and a large number of undead creatures and Tana reed demons formed a huge hole in the ground. In the sky, the Vrox and a large number of gargoyles gathered above the fortress under the cover of the sulfuric acid clouds from the volcanic eruption. After the ground attack began, they immediately folded their wings and quickly cut into the battlefield from the sky at an angle that was close to perpendicular to the ground. A pincer attack from above and below, a 3-dimensional attack, was the tactic that the drows who lived in the caves of the Underdark were used to during the construction of the fortress defensive position, considering the possibility of being attacked from underground. The spellcaster troops were specially mobilized to use mud to rock and other spells to reinforce the foundation. However, due to the problem of construction time, the construction between the 2nd and 3rd layer of the defensive circle had not been completed, so the attack from underground broke out here. Archers prioritize attacking the targets in the air. Cannons guard against other demon armies that may appear outside the fortress. As the commander of the fortress, Keyes promptly adjusted the battle arrangements. The aerial attacks initially caused a lot of trouble for the defenders on the ground, but as the barbed crossbowmen's foot crossbows began to rain arrows on the Vrox and gargoyles, the Vrox and gargoyles either hurriedly flew to higher ground to avoid the attacks or landed to fight the defenders on the ground. Broombrows still maintained his cautious battle style. Although he fought with all his might after killing his way out of the cave, he didn't take the initiative to leap out of the formation. On the other hand, the other vanguards, especially the Tauren captain whom he rarely reminded out of kindness, were mostly in a killing frenzy. After twisting off the head of a zombie or something else that pounced on him, Dalton glanced at the Tauren, who was wrestling with the strange undead creature with 3 heads and 6 arms. I'm afraid that after this battle, we'll have to change captains again. I hope this suicidal mission doesn't fall on my head. But according to the actual situation, his worries were unnecessary. The undead creature that was similar to Neza didn't have the ability to overturn the sea like a child. Even with the souls of several Bugala demons infused into its body, this modified undead creature could only rely on brute force to attack. While the defenders were distracted, it was able to successfully jump over the wall and jump into the battle, but it didn't expect to encounter the Tauren barbarian who relied on brute force to survive. In the blink of an eye, the Tauren barbarian was overthrown. The Tauren wielded a giant axe and flew up and down, chopping the newborn undead into pieces as if he was cutting vegetables. The Tauren barbarian stomped heavily on the skull fragments and pressed them deep into the ground that was airdropped by Bateau. That's all. As if he felt that the opponent was too weak, the Tauren captain stretched his arms and adjusted the posture of the battle axe that was almost the same size as him. Then he plunged into the depths of the army of undead and demons. This was what a vanguard should do. It didn't matter if he was in the mood to kill, but it made broom brows, who wanted to slack off, suffer. Like a fired arrow, the entire vanguard followed the Tauren captain as the arrowhead, and Dalton, who was in the middle of the formation, was swept into the core of the battle. The demons were fearless, and the undead army was fearless. The combination of the two made these monsters a combination that could be said to be unbeatable by all the armies of other material planes. But in the face of the Batsu Devil's machine-like precision and efficient war technology, this combination was not so invincible. Teams of barbed demon sword shield soldiers not only resisted the invaders that spread out from the entrance of the cave, but also tightly surrounded the battle. It was as if they had formed an iron bucket, and the invaders were poured into the bucket as if they were water. Several vanguard teams, like Dalton's team, formed by mercenaries from other planes, plunged into the bucket that was filled with water. Like loaches, they kept churning and killing the invaders. Roar. The one who let out this roar of anger and pain was the leader of the vanguard. He had just chopped off his opponent's head when his arm, which was holding the axe, was pierced through by a Sill demon's halberd. The Sill demon was a humanoid demon with a goat's head. Although its body was skinny, it was full of muscles. The Sill demon's sneak attack directly pierced through the torn steel arm guard, causing serious piercing damage. These demons always habitually gnawed on their weapons, so the halberd was covered with the demon's diseased saliva. Although the Tauren, who was stabbed and went crazy, killed the attacker with a backhand, a large number of gray rashes still appeared on his body. "Be careful," Dalton loudly reminded the surrounding soldiers to not get close to the vanguard captain who might be infected with the disease. At the same time, he carefully put on his disease-isolating mask. The infected Tauren quickly weakened and could only support his body with his axe on the ground, but it did not seem to have much effect. When he fell to the ground, some parasite-like worms emerged from the bodies of the killed demons. Suddenly, they gathered from all directions, as if they were anxious to share this fresh body with him. But more undead and demons surged over, blocking Dalton's vision. He could only see a small part of them. Chapter 57. Do you know what dark meat is? It's the flesh of the dead. Isn't it, my powerful master? The gargoyle butler of Lich Snade stood at the side, looking straight ahead at the ritual array that his master was preparing. However, his ears were constantly listening to the conversation between his master and the newly summoned Quasit. To him, this Quasit was a threat, a guy who might threaten his position as a butler. Sometimes, he really didn't understand what his master was thinking. What could a weak Quasit do? How could such a weak guy, who didn't seem like a demon, help a powerful lich who could easily beat up most spellcasters? That kind of trash was only needed by rookies who had just started to learn magic. Even a slightly more outstanding apprentice would have a better choice. 100 words are better than a single silence. This was a necessary quality to be a butler of a lich. Those who talked too much in front of the lich master wouldn't live long. The gargoyle butler cursed viciously in his heart, but his ears didn't stop for a moment. It seems that you are quite knowledgeable. As a demon of Tana, this is rare, the lich said casually as he flipped through the spellbook. Thank you for your compliment. To serve a wise and powerful spellcaster like you, this is a must. Ha, said the Quasit cautiously. After folding his spellbook, Lich Snade walked to the front of the ritual circle and checked all the runes and materials. Not far away, there was a huge hole exposed on the surface of the ground. Under the supervision of the Lich's living armor construct bodyguards, hundreds of undead creatures were continuously transporting the severed limbs of various creatures out of the hole and piling them up at the designated location of the ritual array. The source of these severed limbs were mostly the soldiers from the material plane who were attacked by the demon and undead army in the distance. The rest were the remains of some demons and low-level demons after being killed. These were all experimental materials that the Lich was about to use. Do you still remember the dark meat that I mentioned just now? The Lich asked the small magic pet, hovering behind him, without turning his head. Of course, my powerful master. Those things are the materials for your secret weapon, right? The Quasit had learned some knowledge about spellcasting from its former masters who had been lured into the abyss by it, so it wanted to show off its worth in front of this terrifying Lich. What a smart little guy. He is indeed a secret weapon, a very powerful one. Snade seemed to be in a good mood. Liches were experts in creating all kinds of undead creatures. The magic circle in front of them was a heart-shaped magic circle that Snade had created after combining the secret magic of creating Soul Catcher and Grave Demon. The Soul Catcher's ability was to absorb other people's souls and imprison them in its own body. The evil secret technique used to create it required absorbing a large amount of souls. The Grave Corpse Demon's innate ability was to take the bodies of other creatures and mix them into its bloated body made of filthy soil and various corpses. Creating it required a large amount of dark flesh. The demons in the lower world, whether it was the Thanner Reed demon or the Batsa devil, had the same flesh and soul. Therefore, their dead bodies could meet the requirements for creating the Soul Catcher. As for the Grave Corpse Demon, a monster that required a large amount of fresh dead bodies and not souls to be created, most of the time it could only be found in the material plane. Fortunately, there were a large number of mercenaries from the material plane in the demonic fortress. After they died in battle, they became the best source of precious materials that Lich Snade could not obtain when he was trapped in this level of the abyss. However, to create these two types of undead creatures, a special guide was needed before the ritual began. An evil and helpless creature was needed as a primer to awaken the monsters. Poof! The bodyguard under Snade's control, who was wearing horror armor, directly pulled out his sword and stabbed the Quasit in the heart after supervising the undead creatures in the magic circle. For the secret weapon, what creature was more evil than a demon? What demon was weaker than a Quasit? This newly summoned pet was the best primer for the ritual. When everything was ready, the Lich ignored the Quasit, who was still alive, begging for mercy or cursing. He stabbed the sword with the evil pet into the center of the magic circle. The ritual began. At this moment, all the undead creatures with a bit of intelligence were trying their best to stay away from this extremely evil ritual circle. However, the initiator of this evil, Lich Sneyd, was standing straight in the center of the circle like an old monk in meditation. He silently endured the pain caused by the magic circle's double deprivation of body and soul. Even the body of a lich that did not feel pain was not immune to this kind of pain. The 3,452nd experiment. The lich muttered in his heart. This was Sneyd's real plan. He wanted to use this method of depriving the soul and body to get rid of the parasitic acid mist worms in his body. No, it was the maggots that were born from the flesh of the demon Lord Worm Tyrant. The lich's immortality came from his phylactery. As long as the phylactery that stored his real life was not destroyed, the lich could not be completely killed. No matter if the body was crushed to pieces by axes or his soul was torn to pieces, he could walk out of the phylactery intact after a few days. Sneyd's consciousness gradually dissipated, but the excitement in his heart became more and more difficult to suppress. This was the closest he had been to successfully escaping from the cage that had imprisoned him for 300 years. The lich seemed to feel that freedom was waving to him. Because of the deprivation of his soul, he only had a little bit of intelligence left. At this time, he was fantasizing about how he could make up for the lost time in the future. So he is an incurable lich. Why is a lich incurable? What is incurable? Before Sneyd's consciousness dissipated, the last thing he saw was the terrifying demon of the swarm that was constantly talking in its sleep. The Scourge Swarm was a high-level existence among the descendants of the tyrant worm. It was a monster that had broken out of the body of the parasitic Tanali demon after completely devouring the consciousness of the latter. Each of the acid mist worms was formed by the violent helpers and blind followers of the material plane who had fallen into the abyss. These guys gathered together in the form of a swarm in the Acid Mist Canyon, the 473rd level of the abyss. They parasitized the body of the evil demon and were born from a destruction that was more profound than the desire of the Tanali demons to destroy. These guys, who were originally just evil followers, had finally become even more evil. The swarm of acid mist worms formed a monster's body. Driven by the common hunger of the worms in its body, it was like a walking disaster that was looking for the flesh and blood of creatures that could fill this hunger. Demons, acid mist worms, and other scourge swarm were all excellent materials that they wanted to turn into nutrients for their bodies. If this guy is a lich, then what are we? We are called swarm because we are numerous. Ha ha ha. We are called disaster because we do all kinds of evil. Ha ha ha. We are called scourge swarm because we are numerous and we do all kinds of evil. Ha ha ha. Praise the great tyrant worm. Ha 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 ha. There was reason in the madness. Although the young Tanali demons of the scourge swarm were always in endless ravings, it could not be denied that they knew how to effectively carry out evil deeds. By devouring the flesh and consciousness of the victims, especially the demons of the lower realms, whose souls and bodies were one, the scourge swarm could always learn some unique skills, such as the ability to use spells. When the palm formed by a large swarm of squirming worms was attached to the control node, the scourge swarm single-handedly reactivated the ritual array that the lich had set up only to peel off the parasites. Did we really create a monster? A brand new species? A feat comparable to the great tyrant worm? You're full of nonsense. Those who speak nonsense must be punished. The punished part was prioritized to be converted into the energy needed to activate the ritual array. As a large number of worms on the scourge swarm's body turned into shriveled shells due to the exhaustion of life force, the ritual array used to awaken a brand new undead creature that combined the characteristics of soul catchers and necrophiles continued to operate. The abyssal soil covered by the ritual array trembled as if it had a pulse. The flesh and limbs used as sacrifices were pulled into the depths of the earth by the soil. The dark, Flesh piled up on the various nodes was now gathered at the center of the ritual array, like a mound of graves that had spontaneously formed. The severed limbs wrapped in the mound of graves quickly decayed under the influence of the negative energy field that was constantly dense with the power of blasphemy. Wisps of phosphorescence lingered around the mound of graves, as if the souls had been ignited and imprisoned and were bound here by an oath. When all the sacrifices were piled up and decayed, a mound of graves more than 10 meters tall suddenly formed. It seemed that even the earth of the abyssal plain, which was already filthy to begin with, loathed the blasphemous creation created by this spell. The huge mound of graves suddenly looked like a punctured cyst. Yellow-green liquid gushed out from the bottom of the mound like pus and sprayed over the entire mound of graves. A brand new undead monster had been awakened. From a distance, this creature looked like a clumsy giant made of mud and stones, but upon closer observation, one could distinguish the hands, head, and other limbs protruding from the body of the deceased. A large amount of yellow-green pus gushed out from the core of his body, gathered into streams on the surface of his body, and then flowed to his feet, polluting the whole earth. The phosphorescence that originally lingered on the huge mound of graves now gathered in the empty holes that looked like facial features, emitting an even more demonic light. Thou art called the bringer of disaster. All the voices in the scourge swarm shouted the same words, which was rare. The huge monster that had been given a name roared towards the sky, as if celebrating its rebirth. Attack! The target is the Batsa Devil's camp. Tear those cowardly devils to shreds. For the glory of the worm tyrant. The scourge swarm regained its original chaotic ravings, but it also gave the monster its first clear goal. Chapter 58. I am no longer who I used to be. This was the life motto of most liches. This was not a philosophical thought, but a fact that the undead creatures themselves pointed out. In order to prevent any mishaps in his escape plan, the drow lich Snade chose to resurrect himself from his phylactery right after he had destroyed himself. For this reason, he had to bear the pain of losing a part of his real life stored in his phylactery and was forced to degenerate into a demolich. He lost his body and became a floating skull. As soon as he came back to life, he sensed that there were no longer those terrifying, nightmarish maggots in his body. The great joy even affected the Otherworld Gate spell he had prepared to escape from the abyss. He suddenly realized that this spell was activated by a spell scroll that was specially stored in his phylactery. It should not have disappeared suddenly because of a mistake in his incantation. Anti-magic field. As soon as he realized what had affected the effect of the spell, the floating skull of the demolich was clamped by a strong hand. Hello, Mr. Lich. Or should I call you Demolich now? The blue dragon youth greeted the captive in his hand. How do you defeat a lich? Find his phylactery and break it. This was what he had heard from a rookie girl who liked to play as a paladin when he was running a team game. Although it was a little rough, it was a concise and comprehensive way to solve the problem. Keys, who had rich experience in running a team game, had a rough idea of what might be hiding behind when he saw so many undead creatures mixed in with the demon army after the battle began. The blue dragon youth deployed the battle plan and plunged into the command room of the stronghold that he had modified into a magic laboratory. The Lich was preparing for an escape experiment, and Keys was preparing for a capture experiment. With a stronghold as his foundation, Keys could now mobilize the magic materials and resources that he could even squander a little. After stacking 3 layers of unorthodox spells that increased his luck attribute, he used a limited prayer spell to summon the Lich's phylactery into his capture trap. This saved him some preparation and magic materials. Phylacteries were usually the best items kept by liches, and there was only a small chance that they would be captured by praying spells. It was the demon lord of this plane, the tyrant worm, who had tried to capture the phylactery the last time. However, even someone as powerful as him had failed to do so. This was probably the best way to describe this situation: a protagonist with great luck encountering a bitter fate. The captured lich phylactery was placed in the anti-magic circle, which was the real reason why Snade's gate to alternate realm failed. You don't. The imprisoned drow lich instinctively wanted to resist in anger. Although the anti-magic field could restrict the effects of some spells, the lich's ability to control arcane spells had become second nature to him. It wasn't as if he had no way of retaliating. However, when he saw that the sharp blade was less than an inch away from his phylactery, he was so angry that he felt as if he was placed under the warm sun. His anger instantly turned into fear. Keyes looked at the half-lich's reaction with satisfaction. Blue, the ogre, was holding the blue dragon's adamantine scythe. If the lich showed any signs of resistance, he wouldn't hesitate to smash the phylactery into pieces. Now we can talk, Mr. Half-Lich. Name, place of birth, home, address. Snade, whose life was threatened, chose to compromise. After carefully answering the question raised by the despicable human in front of him, he tried to tempt him. Young man, I have to say that you're well prepared. In this situation, even a lich can't do anything. But you must have a request, right? How about the powerful spell information? I can give you the spell book. Or do you want a ransom? As an old man with thousands of years of collection, you have to believe that I have some wealth. We can make a deal. A deal, that's right. But if you still mix in some spells when you speak, my friend will definitely make you regret it. After receiving the hint, the clever Blue immediately understood Keyes's intention. He immediately stabbed the sharp blade into Snade's phylactery. No. Because his phylactery was damaged, Snade felt a terrible pain that was worse than death by 1,000 cuts. He hurriedly begged. This is the right attitude to make a deal. Keyes took out a contract made with the skin of an underworld demon. This was what he obtained from the real Ugro's magic merchant's clearance. Although he lost a lot of soul prism, as long as he used it properly, he would be able to recoup the cost. He didn't expect to use it so quickly. Let's sign a labor contract. Keyes slowly showed the scroll to the half-lich. 100 years of labor in exchange for freedom. It's worth it. I want to see the contents of the contract. Blue, I'll sign it. Under Quest's manual persuasion, Lich Snade had no choice but to sign his secret imprint on the contract. Originally, he wanted to tamper with the secret imprint, but in the end, he helplessly discovered that the damn contract had an anti-counterfeiting function. Only the heavens knew where this damned brat had obtained such a high-level magical creation. Mr. Half-Lich Snade, it turns out that you used to be a drow from the world of Toril. Nice to meet you. Looking at the secret imprint on the contract, Keyes was satisfied and carefully put it away. Now, let's perform your first service. That undead monster should be created by you, right? Brew and his new subordinates walked out of the gate of the Fortress Command Center. On the platform at the gate, Quest pointed at a giant monster that was 100 feet tall that could be seen from miles away. It's the final product of my experiment, but I didn't complete it. Snade, who had turned into a half-lich, suddenly remembered that when his original lich body was disintegrated by the ritual, the evil monster that appeared in his unclear memory was probably him who continued the ritual that he had stopped. Even though he had turned into a half-lich, his reasoning and analysis ability did not disappear. However, Snade's speculation was wrong. It was not him, but them. Just like the ancient Greek philosophers on Earth asserted that self-consciousness is just an illusion of continuity, this sentence simply summed up the behavior of the new Tana re-demons like the Scourge Swarm in one word. Freedom. Freedom. How many sins have been committed in the name of thee? The road to conquest is paved with the wreckage of the innocent. In the 50 years of life, there is no one who doesn't kill. All sorts of ravings came out of the wriggling bodies of the cataclysmic worms. This was caused by a small part of the memories and personalities of the previous life that each of the cataclysmic worms that formed the body of the cataclysmic worms had awakened after gaining power. Although the language was extremely chaotic, the instructions that they gave to their creations, the messengers of disaster, were clear and unmistakable. Attack! Destroy the Batsa Devil's stronghold. Chapter 59. Wishes aren't fish. Otherwise, everyone would cast a net. Although Keyes had successfully recruited the Demolic Snade, he still had to face the huge trouble of advancing towards the stronghold. Are you sure that undead creature can't be controlled? Keyes asked the floating skull beside him. Sir, you don't have to doubt this. I've tried 3 times and still couldn't establish a telepathic connection. This means that it already has a controller. The Demolic replied to Keyes in an unchanging, cold tone. According to that damned agreement, as long as it was a task given by Keyes during the period of labor, he couldn't refuse or misinterpret it. Otherwise, his intelligence would be permanently reduced as a punishment. In order to confirm who was controlling the slowly moving monster behind the scenes, Snade summoned his gargoyle butler from afar. It was this gargoyle's report that allowed him and Keyes to understand that it was the work of a group of cataclysmic worms. What a big deal. This undead creature probably has the strength of a legendary monster. Keyes silently assessed in his heart. Sir Commander, the monster has entered the attack range of the Hellscream and the spellcasters. A Bone Devil messenger sent a new message. Order all the cannons to adjust the angle and focus fire. Keyes thought for a moment, and then continued. Order the spellcasters to prioritize sealing the hole that connects to the back of the 3rd layer of defense. Be sure to ensure that such a sudden attack doesn't happen again. The fort commander's orders were passed down as quickly as possible, and they were carried out even more quickly. The enemy's huge figure made it easy for Keyes' barbed devils to aim the cannons. A total of 100 cannons called Hellscream fired in unison, producing a deafening sound. The rising smoke filled the entire artillery position in the stronghold. 2/3 of the hundreds of cannons hit the target, while most of the remaining cannons bombed the forest around the target. The huge impact made the giant made of corpses and decayed soil stagger. As if it felt a huge pain, the phosphorescence that made up its facial features boiled. The web-like meridians made of yellow-green pus sprayed out a large amount of disgusting liquid, polluting a large area of the surrounding land. The group of cataclysmic worms, hiding behind their own creation, was naturally not affected by the artillery fire. Looking at the surrounding forest that was ignited by the artillery fire and the other Thanner re-demons that had fallen to the ground, they let out a maniacal laugh, as if they were celebrating that they were intact, but also as if they were mocking the others who had fallen to the ground. This evil creature made of worms bent down, and its palm into the ground, pulling out a piece of the artillery shell embedded in it. The shell piece was covered with a mixture of pink and green juice, which was left behind by an acidic worm that was hit by a ricochet bullet. Most of the cataclysmic worms, remains of cataclysmic worms as TTSST. The group of cataclysmic worms stuffed the remains of the pink-green worm into their bodies. Surprisingly, the acidic worm that had died due to the explosion was reborn in the body of the group of worms. This was a specially evolved acidic worm. Its size was far smaller than other worms of the same species, and it had no offensive ability. The meaning of its existence was to be used as a communication tool for the high-level worms. After quietly sensing the information conveyed by the worm, the group of cataclysmic worms immediately took the reborn worm out of their bodies. The claws made of worms grabbed a large amount of soil, and then the group of cataclysmic worms buried the pink-green worm back into the ground. We are called cataclysmic worms because we have a large number of people. At this moment, a new barrage of cannon fire once again engulfed the huge body of the Calamity Swarm. The giant made of corpses and rotten soil staggered again, and the bullet holes on its body that had yet to heal deepened a little. Gurgle, gurgle. Ugh. The cataclysmic worms spat out a dark, corrosive missile composed of negative energy and yellowish-green corpse fluid. The missile flew towards the fortress defenders that had attacked it from above. The cataclysmic worms had used the method of spitting to launch the first attack since its birth. The disgusting monsters, thick phlegm, also possessed astonishing destructive power. Although the attack did not hit the artillery troops behind the defensive line, the third layer of defense outside the fortress was spat in the face by the thick phlegm. 2.5 squads of 10 people, nearly 30 otherworldly mercenaries, and 2 squad leaders were all baptized by the yellowish-green corpse fluid missile. No matter how good their armor was, it was impossible for them to avoid the powerful impact. Not to mention, the cataclysmic worms, thick phlegm, also contained lethal poison. All the fallen defenders were quickly poisoned to death. But this was not the end. The yellowish-green mucus contained negative energy that contaminated every inch of the ground it came in contact with. As the sticky liquid spread, large mud pits filled with negative energy formed. The corpses of the fallen soldiers all underwent terrifying changes. The corpses that had fallen began to convulse, and the souls that had yet to dissipate were bound by the mud that was filled with negative energy. Zombies covered in mucus crawled up from the mud. Be careful of those zombies. Are there any priests or mages? Disperse the poison and the negative energy field. The military police squad, made up of several bone devils and barbed devils, immediately suppressed the soldiers who were panicking and immediately made an emergency response according to the situation. However, the cataclysmic worms that was moving towards the fortress saw that its attack was effective. More thick phlegm, missiles were spat out from its mouth. The sticky and deadly yellowish-green liquid was thrown at Key's fortress again and again. Not only did it break down a small section of the wall, but it also connected the poisonous mud that was filled with negative energy on the ground. What's more, in a moment of excitement, the cataclysmic worms even pulled off one of its arms and threw it at the fortress defensive wall as a weapon. Don't retreat. Teams of military police, led by bone devils and barbed devils, stopped the panic that was gradually spreading. Under the threat of the hooked spears and machetes, most of the soldiers from the other dimension chose to compromise. The scattered soldiers were cleaned up by these military police squads on the spot. Even if they were infected by negative energy, it would be difficult for them to turn into undead creatures. Mr. Ricknaz, how's your observation record? Keyes stood in the fortress command room and asked through the communications circle. Under the protection of Golem number 21 and the 3 Ogre brothers, the Goblin Master Engineer volunteered to lead his men to the periphery of the battlefield. He set up a new invention in some inconspicuous corners that could allow him to observe the entire battlefield more objectively, the Goblin Battlefield Observer. This new invention was covered in camouflage rocks, and its core looked like a beholder made of metal. The dozens of mechanical eyes all over the core could achieve the effect of having no blind spots through stretching and twisting. In addition to the normal observation system, this Goblin Battlefield Observer also used the principle of infrared imaging to simulate night vision. This function could also be used to see through some of the enemies who used low-level stealth. The energy source for this new invention was the lead-acid battery that Keyes had obtained from the manufacturing factory of Kotman in the desert of the Ashen World. This battery, with a simple structure but unexpectedly easy to use, gave the goblin Ricknaz a lot of surprises. After understanding the principle, He clearly realized that this was a brand new form of energy storage other than steam energy and magic energy, the two energy sources that the research team, led by the Wrench family, had researched the most. According to Key's explanation, this was a brand new field of knowledge that converted matter into electricity through chemical changes. With a small energy source, he was able to invent this brand new Goblin battlefield observer. Commander Keyes, I think you may need to take a look at this. Ricknaz replied to Keyes after installing the last observer. Through the dozens of new inventions that had been set up, with the fortress as the center, the situation within a radius of a few miles was fully displayed on the magic sand table in the command room where Keyes was. Outside the basin where the fortress is located, a large number of demon armies have been discovered gathering. These are all demons parasitized by the acid mist worms. The goblin Ricknaz and the others had already opened a portal and returned to the battle command room through the beacon they had set up in advance. Other than the mechanical warrior, who could not possibly have any expression and often had strange opinions, everyone else had grave expressions on their faces. So, this troublesome monster in front of us is actually a feint, and its goal is still to create chaos. Then, what is their real attack? Keyes was speaking to his newly recruited little brother, the half-lich Snade. Among everyone present, he was the only one who had stayed in this level of the abyss for more than 300 years. The half-lich looked at the huge demon army that was about to gather on the magic sand table, and said in a cold tone, "The Worm Gate. It must be the Worm Gate. I will open the Worm Gate for thee. All troops, attack." The swarm of catastrophes that had been standing behind the gigantic disaster emissary were now standing on top of the monster's head. The swarm of catastrophes once again burst out with uniform words. Worms slid down from their bodies, and the entire swarm of catastrophes melted like snow in the span of a breath. They covered the monster's head and shoulders, as if a blanket of acid mist worms had been placed over it. Worm Gate, Worm Gate, Worm Gate. Every single acid mist worm that formed the swarm of catastrophes was now chanting the same slogan in the language of the abyss. It was an announcement, but also a reminder of what they had to do next. It could not be helped. The swarm of catastrophes had already lost most of their intelligence after removing their collective state. As they reminded each other, the acid mist worms that formed the carpet twisted and quickly formed a large door structure. You're tuning into the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.